Chapter 417. Beside him, the temptress suddenly pulled him back. She glared at him and asked, "Are you really going to leave me here by myself?" "About that," Yu Qianqiu chuckled. "You're not a loose cultivator, and you didn't take any money either. Why do you have to join in the fun?" As he said that, he turned to the 2 team leaders and the 6 company commanders and said, "Follow me." The 8 of them followed Yu Qianqiu towards a flying transcendent artifact. Ziyi's eyes brightened, and she followed without hesitation. The temptress was taken aback. Suddenly she giggled and said, "So what if I didn't take any money? I don't want it." She smiled coquettishly and followed after them. Yu Qianqiu stomped his feet and turned around. He was speechless. He had never met such a thick-skinned woman before. He then led the group onto the flying transcendent artifact. Everyone looked around. The interior was decorated with many fluorescent stones for illumination. Although it was empty, the tiles were brand new. Clearly they were new. Yu Qianqiu took out a jade archive and examined it. He then smiled and walked to one end. He stomped on a square beneath his feet, and immediately, they heard the buzzing sound of a spring turning from the bottom. Everyone's eyes suddenly lit up. The shields on their left, right, front, and top were retracted with a whoosh. 8 transparent crystal windows appeared before everyone's eyes, allowing them to see the scenery outside. Outside, Dongfang Chang'eo and Qiu Yuan were startled by the movement of this strange object. Why did it suddenly grow eyes? They then saw Yu Qianqiu and the others standing in front of the transparent crystal at the front of the cone, gesturing to the outside world. These 8 windows allow the user of the flying transcendent artifact to observe the situation outside. They don't have to be exposed to the elements outside. If something unexpected happens, they can close the windows at any time. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the circle of transparent crystal windows as he introduced them. He then stomped on the square beneath his feet. Everyone's vision darkened, and the 8 windows were sealed again. She stepped on it again, and the window opened again. While everyone was still in shock, Yu Qianqiu stepped on the other squares under his feet. The sound of springs rang out, and a wide and thick seat rose up behind his buttocks. He sat down calmly and pointed at the platform in front of him that was filled with spirit stones. He smiled and said, "This is the place to replenish the spirit stones. The pilot can sit here and easily control the entire flying mystic instrument." Under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, Yu Qianqiu stood up and put away all these things before entering the spacious cabin. Everyone looked in the direction of his finger and saw that on the cabin floor, there was a square every 2 meters. It was obvious that there was something special about it. Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu walked to the side and stomped on it. Another thick chair rose up. He sat down and touched the small hand valve on the side of his body. The back of the chair could be adjusted very comfortably. Everyone was speechless as they watched. He then pulled down one of the hand valves on the cabin wall, and a small transparent window appeared before everyone's eyes. After Yu Qianqiu closed it again, he stood up and said with a smile, "Those sitting on the side can observe the situation outside through this window." After demonstrating once, he quickly made 8 copies of the Jade Archive in his hand and handed them to the 2 team leaders and the 6 company commanders. He said, "I've done it once. You should understand the gist of it by now. Some of the control methods in here are more or less the same. Just take a look and you'll understand." As he spoke, he suddenly shouted in a deep voice, "Each of the 6 companies will have 1 flying transcendent artifact. The 2 team leaders will each be responsible for 3. Keep in touch with each other. Once we're airborne, immediately discuss and form a battle formation. The target is the coast of the Eastern Sea. Execute the order immediately." As soon as they received the order, the 8 of them immediately perked up and responded in unison, "Yes." Then, they quickly exited the mysterious flying transcendent artifact. Ziyi and the temptress were so shocked that they felt like they were dreaming. They saw Yu Qianqiu walk to the rear cabin with his hands behind his back and pull open a door. He then walked in while shaking his head. "Is there something new in there?" The 2 girls looked at each other and quickly followed him in. Inside the small space, there was a large bed and a recliner. Yu Qianqiu activated a mechanism, and a large protective shell suddenly appeared above his head, letting in the bright sunlight. Then, they saw him leisurely leaning against the recliner, squinting his eyes as he basked in the sun. He looked very relaxed. There's a bed and recliner on the flying transcendent artifact? The two girls looked at the small space in a daze. Suddenly, the flying transcendent artifact shook. The temptress blinked her eyes and quickly walked to the transparent crystal window. The 6 flying transcendent artifacts, including this one, slowly rose into the air and adjusted their direction. Below them, Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Yuan had seen many things in their lives, but they had never seen such a strange flying transcendent artifact. They watched as the 6 flying transcendent artifacts formed a formation in the air, with 1 in the lead and 2 on each side. The one Yu Qianqiu was on was sandwiched in the middle of the formation, becoming the center point of the formation. The 6 flying transcendent artifacts adjusted their direction and quickly flew towards the east. They could vaguely see Yu Qianqiu lying on a recliner and waving at them through the transparent window at the rear of the flying transcendent artifact in the middle. This kid has finally grown up. This is going to be difficult. Dongfang Chang'ao shook his head and smiled bitterly. He turned to the people beside him and said, "They came prepared. The coast of the East Sea is going to be lively." Qiu Yuan said with a solemn face, "We have to quickly spread the news and let the sects prepare." The two of them looked at each other and quickly flew into the 100 Flowers Valley. Zi and the temptress were leaning against the transparent crystal window, chattering like 2 little girls. Their faces were filled with excitement, and they would occasionally point at the white clouds floating by outside as they chatted and laughed, as if they had never seen them before. Yu Qianqiu lazily turned over on the soft recliner and continued to sleep. The temptress turned around and looked, then walked over with a smile. She squeezed her butt onto the recliner and poked a certain someone's waist with her sharp index finger. Yu Qianqiu let out a cry and sat up. He rubbed his waist and glared at her angrily. He shouted, "Are you done yet? What do you want?" The temptress wasn't angry. She looked around and thought to herself, "Thank goodness I'm thick-skinned enough to come here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see such a flying instrument." Thinking of this, she winked at Yu Qianqiu seductively. Yu Qianqiu shuddered and immediately lost his temper. He wanted to move away from the temptress, but the temptress grabbed his hand and asked, "Let me ask you, was this flying instrument really made by the Jing clan of the 4 major clans? Are you trying to seduce me?" Yu Qianqiu struggled, but he couldn't get rid of the temptress. He smiled bitterly and said, "Palace leader Yi, if you have something to say, just say it. Don't pull me, okay?" Zi turned around and glanced at the two of them. She was already used to their actions. She turned around and pressed her face against the transparent window. Her eyes were pure as she looked at the clouds of different shapes that were being thrown far away. The allure beauty glanced at Zi and bit her alluring red lips with her silver teeth. She grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu and whispered in his ear, "Don't call me Palace Lord Yi in the future. My real name is Yi Kun. You can just call me Yi Kun." Her voice was like a devil's voice, very alluring. "Call me Yi Kun? What a mess." Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He rejected the temptation and said, "Don't give me that. Don't you just want to know where this flying instrument came from?" The temptress retracted her hand, blinked her eyes, and said in a tone that seemed both real and fake, "You even saw through this? That's right. I just want to know. With such a comfortable structure, my pink sect will also buy one." Yu Qianqiu escaped from the temptress' hands. He turned around and sat on the bed. He waved his hand and said, "The Jing clan made it. You can buy it from them. I'm just afraid that you can't afford it." "How many spiritual stones do I need?" the temptress asked. "Once you figure out what this flying magic artifact is made of, you won't ask anymore." Yu Qianqiu sneered. The temptress didn't pester him anymore. She knocked around the cabin and thought about it. At the coast of the East Sea, in an uninhabited courtyard, people from different sects were sitting together again. After receiving the news from Dongfang Chang'ao and Qiu Yuan, they all looked at each other. A group of people wanted to poach Yu Qianqiu's people, but in the end, they were cheated by Yu Qianqiu. Bai Shan of the 4 major families sneered. Didn't he know what kind of person Yu Qianqiu was? Every time he saw something good, he would want to take a bite. Now not only did he not get anything, but he also broke his teeth. We can't let that brat have it. Zhu Xianxian of the Daoyuo sect suddenly shouted with a dark face. The group of people all had mocking expressions on their faces. It seemed like this guy was the one who came up with the idea. If Yu Qianqiu found out about it, who knew who would be the one to blame? However, they believed that it couldn't be kept a secret. Everyone looked at Bai Shan, who was smiling coldly. With the relationship between the four major families and Yu Qianqiu, it was possible that Yu Qianqiu already knew about it. Maybe Yu Qianqiu had personally led his people here to settle the score with the Daoyuo sect. After all, no matter how arrogant Yu Qianqiu was, he wouldn't go against the entire Chinese cultivation world. It was very likely that he would go after the Daoyuo sect. Seeing that everyone was silent, Zhu Xianxian looked around and said, "Does no one want to take back the spiritual stones that belong to your sect? Are we going to be cheated by him just like that?" Yuan Jiuquei of the Six Paths Demon sect chuckled and said, "How? Snatch it or trick it? Do you think that we can force him to hand it over by issuing a decree in the name of the Cultivation Alliance?" "Yuan Jiuquei, you have a good idea." Zhu Xianxian's eyes lit up. He slapped his thigh and said loudly, "We will issue a decree in the name of the Cultivation Alliance." Does he dare to go against the entire Cultivation Alliance? Yuan Jiuquei rolled his eyes and sneered. "Zhu Xianxian, don't talk nonsense. What do you mean my idea is good? If you want to do it, do it. Don't drag me into it." As he spoke, he stood up and said, "The war is imminent. I advise everyone to make a decision carefully. Don't let the Cultivation Alliance cause trouble first. I can't make the decision on this matter. I'll have to ask the consecrators in the sect. I'll take my leave first. Goodbye." Only the people in charge of communication were present. The real experts were not present. "Yuan Jiuquei, your Six Paths Demon sect is also a big sect. Is there a need to be so afraid of trouble?" Zhu Xianxian's face sank. Yuan Jiuquei, who was walking out, turned around and stared at Zhu Xianxian. He shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "Zhu Xianxian, some things should be forgotten. There's no need to take it to heart. Sigh. You guys continue the discussion. In short, the Six Paths Demon sect will follow the final decision of the Cultivation Alliance." Then he turned around and said, "I almost forgot. I have to quickly order the hidden sentries in the sect. There's nothing that kid doesn't dare to do. I hope he doesn't cause any accidents when he runs into him." The group of people watched him disappear outside the door. Bai Shan also stood up and cupped his hands at everyone. "The four families are the same as the Six Paths Demon sect. We will follow the final decision of the Cultivation Alliance. I have something to do. I'll take my leave first." With one or two people taking the lead, the other sects found excuses to leave. In the end, Zhu Xianxian was left alone with a gloomy expression. A good discussion had failed just like that. Leaving the two girls in the room, Yu Qianqiu opened the cabin door and walked out. He then closed it again. More than 100 people were sitting neatly in 2 rows in the cabin. When they heard the voice, they immediately stood up and saluted. Yu Qianqiu signaled everyone to sit down. He then asked the leader of the team, "How's the flying artifact? Are you used to it?" "Very good. It's better than all the ones I've used before." The leader was a little excited. As the two were talking, the flying artifact suddenly slowed down. The two of them swayed. The leader suddenly turned around and shouted, "Company leader, what's going on?" "Leader, someone stopped the flying artifact of the leader of the second team." The leader of the first team, who was driving the artifact, replied loudly. The leader flashed to the front and seemed to be communicating with the people of the second team. Yu Qianqiu walked over slowly with an expressionless face. Looking through the transparent window, he saw a dozen people in a small flying artifact blocking his way. He snorted coldly and said, "Let's ask who stopped us first." The leader nodded and quickly got it through telepathy. He then reported, "It's a patrol team formed by a few small sects of the Cultivation Alliance. They want us to show our pass token." Yu Qianqiu's expression softened a little. He nodded and said, "I'm doing my job. I'll cooperate with them." The leader took the order, opened the cabin door, and flew out. After showing the pass token, he negotiated with those people. Not only did those people not leave, but they also followed the leader. After the leader flashed in, he asked, "They said they've heard of your name for a long time. They want to pay you a visit." After coming out of the special forces, there was a rule that the title leader could not be used outside. Oh, let them in. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The leader went to the cabin door and let more than a dozen people in. As soon as these people from the small sects came in, they immediately saw more than 100 masked people staring at them. They suddenly felt a little uneasy and nervous. It was said that these people were all experts of the tribulation stage. "This is the Mr. Yu you want to see." The leader waved his hand and said. Yu Qianqiu laughed and walked over. He smiled amiably and said, "Everyone, you've worked hard. I'm Yu Qianqiu. I don't know what I can do for you." Although Yu Qianqiu's reputation was not very good, his history of struggle had long been something that the young disciples of the various sects talked about. Many grassroots disciples dreamed of becoming someone like Yu Qianqiu. When Yan Bugui brought people to challenge him, Yu Qianqiu killed his opponent with one strike. Although the young disciples of the various sects did not see it with their own eyes, it was spread like wildfire. Especially when he said, "So what if I'm famous or not? One strike is enough." This made the grassroots disciples of the various sects worship him crazily. Coincidentally, these people were sent here to investigate suspicious cultivators. When they saw the 6 extraordinary flying artifacts, they thought it was someone from a large sect. They did not expect to meet a legendary grassroots idol. So one of them mustered up the courage to ask for a meeting with the leader. The leader wanted to refuse, but he remembered that Yu Qianqiu was here. It was not good for him to make a decision for him, so he came to ask for instructions. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu would agree without hesitation? The young disciples thought that Yu Qianqiu would be like those people from the large sects, and just say a few perfunctory words to them. Who knew that he would be so easy to talk to? The group of disciples from the small sects immediately relaxed a lot. They all bowed and said, "I've heard of Mr.'s great name for a long time. We've come to pay our respects." "No need to be so polite. We're all friends. If you continue to be so polite, I won't be happy," Yu Qianqiu said, pretending to be angry. "Do you also think that I'm like the rumors outside? A scum or a madman in the cultivation world?" The dozen or so people were seen through by him. They all scratched their heads and smiled awkwardly. One of them mustered up the courage to reply, "To be honest, mister, we were indeed a little worried before. Now that we've met mister, we know that those were all rumors." "Yes, I believe that what you said is the truth. Other than being a trustworthy person, I also like people who tell the truth the most." Yu Qianqiu patted his shoulder kindly and sighed. "But rumors are terrible. Maybe after many years, when your cultivation is successful, you will inevitably encounter similar rumors. I hope that you can treat it with a normal heart. Don't be like me. Sometimes, when I can't hold it in anymore, I get into a fight. It's clearly something I'm in the right, but the more I fight, the worse my reputation becomes. Sigh. I'm a good example. I hope that you can learn from it. This is my advice to you as a person who has been through it." The group of people fell into deep thought when they heard this. The disciple who was patted on the shoulder was a little agitated. "From what I see, someone is clearly jealous of Mr. And that's why they purposely spread rumors to slander you. But so what? If I had Mr.'s ability, I definitely wouldn't forgive anyone who dares to talk about me like that. That's too shallow, too shallow." Yu Qianqiu shook his shoulder and warned him, "Don't learn from me. If that day comes, you must endure when you need to. You must know that if you take a step back, everything will be fine. If you endure for a while, everything will be fine. Don't be impulsive, understand?" Ze and the temptress, who were in the rear cabin, had already opened the cabin door to see what was going on. Now that they heard Yu Qianqiu's tireless and sincere words, the temptress's expression was indescribably strange. Seeing that the group of young cultivators were all silent, Yu Qianqiu patted the disciple's shoulder again and laughed. "It's fate that we can meet. Let's not talk about unhappy things. This is my new flying artifact. It's also unique in the cultivation world. Dongfang Chang'eo from Fuxian Island and Qiu Wuyuan from 10,000 Demons wanted to come up and have a look, but I coaxed them away. Why don't you all take some time to look around? Let me be the host. Hearing that such a famous person didn't even have the qualifications to come here, these people were indeed eager to try. However, after looking at each other, they all bowed to Yu Qianqiu. The disciple cupped his hands and said, "We appreciate Mr.'s kindness, but we have been ordered to come here. We don't dare to delay for too long, so we bid farewell to Mr. Since you all have important matters to attend to, I won't disturb you anymore." Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and turned to Team Leader 1. "We didn't prepare any greeting gifts. Let's give each of you 10 top-grade spirit stones." No need, no need. The group of people quickly waved their hands. But Team Leader 1 didn't say anything. He resolutely carried out the order and stuffed a handful of spirit stones into everyone's hands. The group of people held the spirit stones and looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Yu Qianqiu smiled amiably and said, "Take it all. Take it as a greeting gift. Take it as a witness to our reunion." Hearing this, the group couldn't refuse and could only thank him. After they left, the 6 flying artifacts began to speed up. Yu Qianqiu was still waving at them from the cabin door. More than 10 people stood on the small flying artifacts and watched as Yu Qianqiu and the rest disappeared into the distance. They sighed as they looked at the spirit stones in their hands. With Yu Qianqiu's current status in the cultivation world, he didn't even pay attention to the sect masters of a sect. Yet, he looked favorably upon these useless grassroots disciples. Furthermore, he patiently encouraged them with kind words, and even gifted them with a large amount of spirit stones. The disciple who had close contact with Yu Qianqiu turned to look at the crowd and said, "All the sects say that Mr. Yu is a scum and a lunatic. I hope that the people who say these things can be as scum and as crazy as Mr. Yu. Then our cultivation world will be peaceful." Another person sighed. "It's obvious that Mr. Yu is in the limelight. All the sects are obviously working together to suppress him." Sigh. Similar things don't only happen in the cultivation world. We've seen such things in all the sections. Be careful with your words. We can only say these things here. Don't spread it back to the sect. Otherwise we'll be in trouble. What are you afraid of? Don't tell me someone will tell on us. Sigh. Mr. Yu is a good person. A group of disciples who didn't know the truth were bored. They were chattering and vindicating Yu Qianqiu in a small area. It just so happened that the journey was lonely. He didn't expect to become a teacher who spread the truth again. Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood. He said to Team Leader 1, "If we encounter similar checks again, invite all the young disciples from the various sects who have low cultivation bases. If they are that old, forget it. Those old and stubborn people have already set their minds. It's hard to change them. Don't waste my breath. Just deal with it." Understood. Team Leader 1 nodded. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to turn and leave, he suddenly thought of something and snorted. "There is one exception. If you encounter people from Daluo sect, tell Team Leader 2 to first send people to cripple them. Then don't let any of them go. Capture them all. I want to give Daluo sect a greeting gift." After giving his instructions, Yu Qianqiu returned to the rear cabin with his hands behind his back. When he entered, he saw Ziyi looking at him strangely. The Allure beauty covered her mouth and giggled. "Mr. Yu is indeed a kind person. He's the model for all sects to learn from. I knew you were a bad woman." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at her. He said to Ziyi with a serious expression, "Some people's words cannot be trusted easily, especially those who speak ill of others behind their backs." Hearing this, the Allure beauty laughed even more happily. She continued, "Especially those who speak nonsense and lie without blinking. You can't trust the words of these people. Mr. Yu, do you think I'm right? Haha." Chapter 418. A good man doesn't bicker with a woman. Yu Qianqiu threw down these words and confidently returned to his chair to rest. The Allure beauty smiled and slowly retreated to the bed. She pulled over the thick blanket and curled up inside. She closed her eyes and looked satisfied, as if she had found what she had been looking for many years. The bed was big enough, and Ziyi sat down cross-legged in a corner. Just as he calmed down, Yu Qianqiu, who was pretending to sleep, suddenly discovered that something was wrong with his dantian. He could not help but look inside himself, and saw that his nascent soul had actually stopped breathing, and the red and black spheres revolving around it were speeding up. Moreover, it was getting faster and faster, stirring up the quintessential essence in his dantian. The quintessential essence was stirred up like a tornado, and as it spiraled, it seemed to show signs of becoming thicker. Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes and stood up. A thought popped into his head. Was he going to make a breakthrough again? The two women were also alerted by his movements. Seeing his dignified expression, they looked at each other. Just as the allure beauty was about to ask something, Yu Qianqiu said, "Zi, protect me. My cultivation is about to break through to the middle stage of nascent soul. Don't let anyone disturb me." He sat down cross-legged on the deck and closed his eyes to carefully observe the movement in his dantian. Ziyi's expression became serious. She knew that when a cultivator was about to make a breakthrough, they couldn't be disturbed. If they missed this opportunity, it would be hard for them to make any more progress. She immediately moved to his side and looked around vigilantly. When her gaze swept past the allure beauty, she was actually on guard. After the allure beauty saw what the two were doing, she felt a bit sad. Yu Qianqiu subconsciously called Ziyi to protect him and didn't call her. It was obvious who the two women were in his heart, especially Ziyi's vigilant gaze. It made her even more confused. It turned out that she hadn't really integrated with the two of them. Perhaps they were subconsciously on guard against her. "I'll go guard outside the door in case someone comes in and disturbs you." The allure beauty smiled awkwardly. Purple Dress nodded solemnly. She was on high alert, and even pulled the handbrake to have the protective shell cover the transparent window again. The 100 Charm beauty lightly sighed in her heart, and she smiled as she left. "If I don't leave now, then I'm afraid I'll become Ziyi's main target. Is there a need for that?" The movement in his dantian made Yu Qianqiu a little uneasy. The true essence in his dantian was stirred up into a tornado. He had never heard of such a phenomenon before. He also knew that his cultivation method was different from other cultivators. Therefore, he did not have any experience to learn from. However, there was one thing that was beyond doubt. Only when one's true essence became more substantial would it represent that one's cultivation would become more profound. Just like the protective aura released by a transcending tribulation stage expert, only when the true essence was thick to the point that the protective aura released would be hard to break. If it was at the soul formation stage, then the protective aura released would naturally be even more difficult. It was clear that at this moment, the true essence in his dantian was spinning rapidly. It was trying to reach the next level. However, it was like there was no place for it to borrow strength from. It spun in the air, and like a bone scraper, it swept across the walls of his dantian. Yu Qianqiu was in so much pain that he trembled. He clenched his teeth and endured it. That damned nascent soul was sitting peacefully between the red and black beads. There was no reaction at all. How could this be? Ziyi was shocked. She was also a nascent soul stage cultivator. Although it was uncomfortable, it shouldn't be like this. Increasing the resistance and slowing down the speed should reduce the pain. Yu Qianqiu was in so much pain that his whole body was covered in sweat. He bit his lips so hard that they bled. When he could no longer endure it, this thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Ziyi saw that he had bitten his lips so hard that they bled. She trembled with fear, but she didn't know how to help him. She just stood there anxiously. Right now, she even wanted to go out and pull the beauty of 100 Charms in to ask her if she knew what was going on. In her anxiousness, she suddenly saw a purple spirit stone appear in each of Yu Qianqiu's hands. The spirit stone's luster gradually dimmed in his palms. The spiritual energy within it was obviously being absorbed. Ziyi was slightly stunned. She had never used any spirit stones before. But it didn't mean that she didn't know what a purple spirit stone meant. He actually had the legendary top-grade spirit stone. Ziyi forgot to be anxious. She watched in surprise as he threw away one spirit stone and took another. This big liar. Who knew how many more secrets he was hiding? The rich spiritual energy in the top-grade spirit stone poured into his dantian. Finally, the rotation of the true essence slowed down a little. His dantian became bulging. However, the two damn beads didn't slow down at all. They stirred the true essence in the thick spiritual energy, the bead's rotation speed, the resistance of the spiritual energy, and the limited pressure of the dantian. Under these three forces, the true essence was quickly compressed and gradually became thick. It really worked. Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. However, once the true essence was compressed, there was more space left, and the resistance of compression was smaller. It was difficult to continue to compress it further. Without hesitation, Yu Qianqiu absorbed the spiritual energy again. He endured the swelling pain of his dantian and sucked crazily. He desperately increased the pressure of the true essence. When the true essence was compressed a little thicker, he poured spiritual energy into his dantian to fill it, until the water-like true essence turned into a substance like silk cloth. It was milky white and delicate, and its volume shrank by 100 times. Suddenly, the nascent soul that had stopped breathing suddenly spat out a big bubble, as if it had choked on water in a river. What it spat out was nothing else but a mass of milky white true essence. It merged with the milky white that had been compressed just now. It was as if this thing was blocking his airways, causing him to be unable to breathe. As such, the dual jewels protecting his body had to lend him a helping hand, causing his entire dantian to become restless. And now he was finally able to breathe. In an instant, the whole dantian quieted down. The two beads' rotation speed returned to their usual state of protecting the nascent soul. The nascent soul that could breathe took a deep breath. The rich spiritual energy was sucked in. It rotated in its abdomen and spat out a silk-like white true essence. Yu Qianqiu's whole body shook. He let out a weak moan in comfort. A smile appeared on his face. He finally broke through. Ziyi also let out a sigh of relief. She also saw that he had broken through. As soon as Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes, he saw Ziyi's suspicious face coming over. He was startled and said, "What are you doing? Are you trying to molest me?" Ziyi pointed at the light purple spirit stone in his hand that had not finished absorbing the spiritual energy. She asked, "Do you really have no money? I heard that this top-grade spirit stone is very valuable." Yu Qianqiu looked down. Although he had already absorbed enough spiritual energy, he still forcefully absorbed the remaining spiritual energy. The spirit stone in his hand immediately became a dead gray. No one could tell that it was a top-grade spirit stone. Then, he swept all the dried-up spirit stones on the ground into his storage pouch, got up and patted his butt. "Of course I'm short of money. Don't look down on me, because I have a few top-quality spirit stones in my hands. They were given to me by my master to use when I cultivate and advance. I can't just throw away the things that my master told me. Do I have to show off to everyone? Hey, this top-grade spirit stone was given to me by my master. My master has a top-grade spirit stone. If such a good thing were to be known, what do you think the consequences would be?" Ziyi frowned and nodded solemnly. She said, "It's very likely that someone with ulterior motives will target you. You're really smart. Not bad. This is why I don't let others see it. I'm worried about others, but I don't need to be on guard against you," Yu Qianqiu said. He put his mouth next to Ziyi's ear and whispered, "That's why I asked you to protect me. I didn't ask her to. Do you know why now?" Ziyi heard this and nodded as if nothing had happened. In fact, her face was full of joy, and she could not hide it even if she wanted to. When one's cultivation was breaking through, it was best for the most trusted person to be the protector. Choosing her, it turned out that Yu Qianqiu trusted her more. Yu Qianqiu took the opportunity to breathe in the faint fragrance of a virgin. He smacked his lips and found that it was slightly painful. Only then did he realize that he had bitten his lips. Thus, he let out a puddle of water. Under Ziyi's careful guidance, he washed the blood on his mouth. The allure beauty leaned on the outside and looked at the more than 100 people. There was no joy or sorrow on her face. She was lost in her thoughts. The cabin door suddenly opened. Ziyi poked her head out and smiled. The 100 Charms beauty was startled. She turned around and went in, only to see Yu Qianqiu standing there with his legs crossed. The protective shell on top of his head had been opened again, and the sky outside was already filled with stars. "You broke through?" The allure beauty walked to Yu Qianqiu and asked with a smile. There was a bitterness hidden in her smile. It seemed that this question was a bit unnecessary. If he did not break through, it would be strange if he could be so carefree. Yu Qianqiu smiled proudly and answered her in this way. The allure beauty did not ask any more questions. She still had a seductive smile on her face. She casually returned to the bed and continued to curl up in the thick blanket. She suddenly felt that she should have a good sleep. Perhaps her mood would be better tomorrow. The stars in the night sky were so brilliant. They were so deep, beautiful, and enchanting. However, they did not make her open her eyes for a while. She, who had been meditating and resting for many years, actually fell asleep quietly. The next day, the 6 flying artifacts in the sky were the first to bear the light of the rising sun. Lying on the chair, Yu Qianqiu still felt that it was dazzling with his eyes closed. He tilted his head to look. Ziyi was meditating at the corner of the bed. Her expression was solemn. The blue velvet blanket on the side was half wrapped around a beautiful body. The red muslin had been rolled up at some point, and 2 extremely seductive jade legs were quietly resting on the blanket. The half-rolled-up blue velvet hooked onto the 2 jade legs, making the 2 thighs appear even more white and creamy. The worst thing was that a certain person did not know how to restrain himself when he slept. Although he was wearing underwear, he did not know how to cover his private parts. I have sinned, I have sinned. Sex is emptiness, emptiness is sex. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He could only recite the Sex Sutra 10 times in his heart. He turned his head and forced himself to face the dazzling sunlight. He shouted in his heart, "Eyesight! Blind my eyes with that stab." Chapter 419. The 6 flying artifacts sped across the sky and did not stop at all. But there were exceptions. Team 2 followed Yu Qianqiu's instructions and invited all the young disciples who were being interrogated by the Cultivation Alliance to Utopia Number 1 to accept Yu Qianqiu's ideological reform. However, Yu Qianqiu had a bad reputation, and some disciples were really afraid. They did not want to go, but they could not stand the other party's warm invitation. After meeting Yu Qianqiu, they were instantly touched by Yu Qianqiu's spring breeze-like warmth. After receiving the greeting gifts, they regretted listening to the rumors. In Yu Qianqiu's words, this was called moving with emotion and understanding with reason. Of course, that was a greeting gift. The sects set up many similar interrogation points everywhere, and then set up a communication matrix within a certain range. Naturally, this was to make it convenient for them to report to the Cultivation Alliance in time if they discovered anything suspicious. Therefore, the Cultivation Alliance received the news that Yu Qianqiu's 6 flying artifacts were closing in. The interrogation points asked, "Did Yu Qianqiu and the others cooperate with the interrogation? Did they cause any trouble?" What surprised the various sects was that the replies from many of the interrogations all said, Yu Qianqiu actively cooperated with the interrogations. His attitude was very good, and there were no signs of him causing trouble at all. Accidents were accidents, but not causing trouble was a good thing. The sects that had participated in the poaching sighed in relief. Daoyuo sect had instructed their disciples to be on guard. If they encountered Yu Qianqiu and his attitude was not good, they must tolerate it as much as they could, lest Yu Qianqiu take the opportunity to cause trouble. But after receiving such news, Zhu Xianxian was relieved. It seemed that Yu Qianqiu did not dare to go against the entire Cultivation Alliance. At least he knew what was good for him. When the Daoyuo sect disciples received the warning from the sect, they were all terrified. Everyone knew that Yu Qianqiu had a deep grudge with the Daoyuo sect. They had clashed with each other again and again. Even the sect master's son was killed by that bastard. What else could he not do? It was said that he had brought more than 600 cultivators at the crossing calamity stage with him. What should he do? Zhao Chong was an early-stage tribulation passing elder of the Deluo sect. He was usually by the side of Luo Kuan, one of the top experts of the Deluo sect. Now that he had been sent to a checkpoint of the Deluo sect, it was truly a waste of his talents. In this battle, Luo Kuan and several experts in the late tribulation passing stage had come to help the Deluo sect. He could be considered the number 1 figure among the people from the Deluo sect. After receiving Zhu Xianqian's report about Yu Qianqiu, Luo Kuan ordered his men to calculate Yu Qianqiu's route and sent his trusted aide, Zhao Chong, to the place where Yu Qianqiu must pass. The purpose was simple: put aside the past and try to restrain the disciples from clashing with Yu Qianqiu at this time. Otherwise, they would become a laughing stock to the other sections. Now was not the time to settle the score. Zhao Chong had been with Luo Kuan for a long time. In the De Luo sect, no one dared to disrespect him. After a long time, he inevitably became a little arrogant. In his heart, he also felt that he had been wronged. He had been sent to a small checkpoint to deal with the rogue. Although he was unwilling, he did not dare to object to Luo Kuan's arrangement. In the sea of clouds, the De Luo sect's flying artifact was hidden. This way, it was convenient for them to observe the surroundings. On the flying artifact, there were 15 people, including Zhao Chong. A leader named Lu Su looked at the arrogant Zhao Chong and asked carefully, "Elder Zhao, why does that Yu Qianqiu always make life difficult for our De Luo sect?" Humph. Zhao Chong glared at him and snorted. "You De Luo sect disciples should remember this. Kind people get bullied, and tame horses get ridden. Our De Luo sect is ranked second among the righteous sects, so you must show the backbone of a great sect. Don't be like some people, who can remain indifferent even when their own sons are killed after suffering a bit. Humph. Boosting the morale of others while lowering our own prestige is a great humiliation to the De Luo sect." Lu Su clicked his tongue. He had long heard that this elder Zhao was arrogant, but he didn't think he would dare say such things to that person. He naturally knew who Zhao Cheng's son was killed, but the topic was too sensitive. He didn't dare continue. If word got out, an early core formation realm disciple like him wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Thinking of this, Lu Su couldn't help but worry. As soon as he received the news from the sect, he was prepared to avoid Yu Qianqiu's flying artifact and hide in the clouds. No matter how much Yu Qianqiu hated the De Luo sect, he couldn't possibly search for them everywhere. Who knew that the front lines would send this guy to restrain them? From his tone, it sounded like he was here to restrain them. He was clearly pushing them into a pit of fire. Sigh. Just hide in the De Luo sect and act arrogantly. Why didn't you think about what kind of person Yu Qianqiu was? He didn't care what sect you were from. Even sect master Luo Qingtian, a mid-tribulation passing cultivator, lost an arm in a one-on-one duel. Why did you, an early tribulation passing cultivator, come looking for trouble? Lu Su turned around and exchanged a glance with the people behind him. He could see that everyone had a hint of worry on their faces, and it was clear that they all had the same concerns as him. Lu Su couldn't help but shake his head with a wry smile. He hoped that Elder Zhao didn't want to lose face in front of the disciples, and deliberately said something like that. What he feared had come. In the distance, the sound of several flying artifacts piercing through the air could be heard. With a little effort, they could tell that there were 6 flying artifacts, which matched the number of flying artifacts Yu Qianqiu had brought. The expressions of the dozen or so people changed drastically. After looking at each other, they all looked at Elder Zhao. Zhao Chong snorted slightly and steered his flying artifact into the clouds to look into the distance. In the distance, 6 black dots were flying in their direction at high speed and would soon meet them. Zhao Chong directly controlled the flying Dharma artifact to rush out and tyrannically block the path of the 6 flying Dharma artifacts. The 6 flying artifacts had clearly noticed them as well and slowed down as they approached. The group from the exalted sect sized up the 6 celestial artifacts in front of them. They were oddly shaped, and even under the bright sun, they exuded an eerie aura. They even had eyes at the front, and through those transparent eyes, they could vaguely see people sitting inside. The Daoyuo sect is here on orders from the Cultivation Alliance to interrogate suspicious cultivators. If you have a pass, hand over your pass. If you don't, open your cabin and accept the interrogation. Zhao Chong clearly wanted to show off his strength to Yu Qianqiu and the others. When he roared, even the disciples behind him felt as though their ears were about to explode. The Daoyuo sect disciples held their breaths and watched the other party's movements. After Zhao Cheng's shout, The three flying artifacts in the triangular formation at the front suddenly moved. It was as if the eyes had suddenly closed. The group did not understand what was going on. Zhao Cheng snorted coldly and shouted again. The Daluo sect is here on orders from the Cultivation Alliance. How dare you? The tone of the shout suddenly changed. The group of people were also startled by the other party's movements. They saw the three flying artifacts in front of them shooting over in a frenzy, directly colliding with the small flying artifacts beneath their feet. They did not even say a word to each other. Oh my God! The Daluo sect disciples cried out and jumped down from their flying artifacts. After they dodged the impact, they released their flying swords and steadied themselves in the air. Looking up, they saw that Zhao Cheng was clearly trying to dodge with his flying artifact. However, it happened so suddenly, and the three monstrous things had deliberately planned for this. There was a loud bang in the air. Zhao Cheng leaped into the air and flew away. The flying artifact under his feet was knocked far away, and he quickly rolled toward the dear earth to hug it. The group of disciples still had lingering fear, and a bad feeling welled up in their hearts. At first, everything was fine, but when they heard that it was the Daluo sect, they immediately became impolite. They clearly did not like the Daluo sect. How dare you? How dare you defy the decree of the Cultivation Alliance? Zhao Cheng shouted, and a cold light flashed from his storage bag. Under his guidance, it first shot into the sky, then quickly turned around and shot toward one of the flying artifacts. Bang! There was a loud bang, and the flying sword hit its target smoothly. Zhao Cheng recalled his flying sword, and was slightly taken aback. Under his full strength, the other party's flying artifact was actually undamaged. Even the scratch was not very obvious, almost unnoticeable. Oh my! What material is this flying artifact made of? The expressions of the Daluo sect disciples below all changed. They saw that Zhao Cheng's sword seemed to have poked a hornet's nest. Dozens of black shadows flashed out from the flying artifact that was hit. More than a dozen of them shot into the sky and surrounded Zhao Cheng from all directions. The rest of them scattered. The disciples' vision blurred, and they found that each of them was standing in front of a masked man in black, staring at them indifferently. The words itinerant cultivator on the men's chests made the disciples subconsciously shiver. They immediately remembered the news they had heard recently. Yen Bugui led a group of tribulation stage experts to sneak attack the 100 Flowers Valley. Yu Qianqiu suddenly attacked, and the 600 itinerant cultivators under him killed almost all of the tribulation stage experts without suffering any losses. Zhao Cheng looked around in the sky and saw that he was surrounded by masked men in black, and they were all at the early stage of the tribulation stage, similar to his cultivation level. He immediately waved his hand and shouted, "How dare you? I am a disciple of Daluo sect's Honorable Luo Kuan. You itinerant cultivators dare to surround me? Are you tired of living? Who is Luo Kuan?" A strange question came from below. Zhao Cheng looked down and saw a man and two women standing on one of the flying artifacts. The man was asking an enchanting woman a question. The enchanting woman giggled and said, "Luo Kuan is the honorable cultivator of Daluo sect in the late stage of the tribulation stage. It is said that he is ranked third in the Daluo sect. He is the leader of the Daluo sect's expedition to the East Sea. Oh, then I'll have to ask him why his Daluo sect keeps looking for trouble with me." The man nodded slightly. Zhao Cheng shouted, "Who is down there? Come up and answer me." Even at this time, the man's tone was still so unyielding, as expected of a big sect. Where did this old bastard come from? He really doesn't know his place. After the man cursed, he waved his hand and pointed. "Cut that stubborn guy into a human stick, seal his dantian, and bring him here. Don't kill him. This is my greeting gift to the Daluo sect." Chapter 420. If you remove his limbs, you'll be called a human stick. The Daluo sect members were shocked to hear this. Seeing him call out to these wandering cultivators, they could vaguely guess who he was. "You're Yu Qianqiu." Zhao Cheng's eyes widened in anger. How could he hesitate when he heard the other party's words? Before the wandering cultivators could make a move, he released his stellar energy to protect himself. His sword created a huge sword shadow with all his might, and he slashed out wildly, forcing the masked wandering cultivators in front of him to retreat. It seemed that he was not afraid, or he would not have to run for his life. But with so many people here, and with his stellar energy slowing him down, where could he run? He had just run a few dozen meters when a group of flying swords attacked him, hitting his stellar energy with a bang-bang. He was knocked upside down in the air. A dozen or so black shadows flashed, and immediately trapped him again. The dozen or so people called back their flying swords and raised them together, creating a huge sword shadow that struck Zhao Chang's stellar energy from all directions. With a loud bang, the protective aura shield instantly disappeared. Zhao Chang, who was inside, was also shocked until he was dizzy. His face was pale, and blood oozed from his nostrils. His eyes were dazzled, but he knew that survival was the most important thing at this time. He wanted to raise his sword to protect himself, but he found that his arms were light. When he came back to his senses, Zhao Chang let out a scream of horror. He didn't know when his arms and legs had been separated from his body. No wonder they were so light. "Yu Qianqiu," Zhao Chang howled in grief, but a black shadow flashed by and struck his abdomen with a palm. His body shook, and he immediately felt his dantian locked, unable to circulate his spiritual origin. His whole body quickly withered, and he quickly fell from the sky. The people below grabbed his belt and quickly patted the roots of his severed limbs, stopping the gushing blood. "Yu Qianqiu, you'll die a horrible death." Zhao Chang howled unwillingly. Not far away, Lu Su sighed slightly. He was really used to being flattered in the Deluo sect. He was so arrogant that he didn't even know who he was. He only regretted it when he suffered a loss. "Hee, I'd like to see who will die a horrible death. Sharp tongue, come on. Break his teeth and pull out his tongue." Yu Qianqiu sneered with his hands behind his back. This was the first time he had encountered such a reckless person. If he did not treat him well, he would be letting down the Grand Immortal Sect's efforts in nurturing him. "Yu Qianqiu, don't you dare." As soon as Zhao Chang said that, the masked man lifted him up high and punched him in the mouth. The sound of his teeth cracking was hair-raising. The Deluo sect disciples watched as the masked man moved his hand around Zhao Chang's mouth. Then, the masked man pulled out something bright red and threw it away. Zhao Chang's neck went limp and he fainted. The disciples trembled in fear as they looked at the masked man in front of them. Purple Dress turned her head slightly to the side, as if she couldn't accept something that was too cruel. The Allure Beauty's pupil shrank slightly. Yu Qianqiu looked coldly at the Deluo sect disciples around him, and said indifferently, "You're just small fries in the Deluo sect. I shouldn't have bothered with you. If you want to blame someone, blame yourselves for being Deluo sect disciples, and getting involved in the grudge between me and the Deluo sect. You can't blame others for this." He waved his hand lightly and said, "Cripple their cultivation, but spare their lives." The dozen or so Deluo sect disciples immediately turned pale with fright. They had cultivated so hard. Who would be willing to be a mere mortal? Once their cultivation was crippled, it would be a fate worse than death. Now they probably couldn't do it anymore. There was no need for any discussion. The dozen or so disciples held on to their last glimmer of hope and fled frantically. However, the difference in their cultivation was too great. In the blink of an eye, the masked man caught up to them. Cries of pain rang out in the air as their dantian was destroyed. From then on, they would no longer be able to gather true yuan to cultivate. The group of disciples who were as limp as sheep were thrown into the flying artifacts. The 6 black figures moved again and sped east. At the shore of the eastern sea, in the empty backyard of a large residence, a communication array was set up. For elders wearing the Deluo sect's uniform frowned. The one standing at the front was Luo Kuan, and the 3 behind him were also consecrators of the Deluo sect. They were called Cui Zhaofan, Li Mengbai and Zhu Zhao. Luo Kuan said to one of the disciples in the spirit stone array, "Still no contact?" The disciple replied with some fear, "I've already asked the disciples of the other sects nearby to help me search. They really haven't found any disciples from our sect. It's already been a day. It's impossible for Zhao Chong and the others to not contact this place for so long. Something must have happened. As Luo Kuan spoke, he turned to look at the three elders behind him. The three of them nodded slightly, clearly agreeing with him. Zhu Xianxian, who was standing to the side, bowed respectfully to the four elders and said, "For consecrators, in this disciple's opinion, there shouldn't be any accidents under normal circumstances. If there really is an accident, I'm afraid that Yu Qianqiu will have something to do with it. If we calculate the time we lost contact with them, it should be around the same time as Yu Qianqiu." Luo Kuan nodded slightly, then asked the other three consecrators, "What do you think?" "Zhu Xianxian, I want to ask you something," Li Mengbai, the youngest of the four consecrators, said as he looked into the sky. "Consecrator, please ask. This disciple will tell you everything he knows," Zhu Xianxian said respectfully. Li Mengbai slowly retracted his gaze and stared at him, saying, "You've interacted with Yu Qianqiu the most, so you should know him well. If something really happened to Zhao Chong at the hands of Yu Qianqiu, I want to ask you, why does Yu Qianqiu keep targeting our Deluo sect? This person is narrow-minded, and he's a notorious scoundrel in the cultivation world. Ever since he became enemies with our Deluo sect, he's been harboring a grudge against us. If we don't get rid of this person and allow him to continue developing, he'll become a scourge to our sect sooner or later," Zhu Xianxian said in one breath. "Oh," Li Mengbai nodded noncommittally and said, "I heard that the Cultivation Alliance's idea to divide up the 600 cultivators under Yu Qianqiu was your idea." Zhu Xianxian suddenly realized that the consecrator's tone was a little off. He paused and said, "Yes, this disciple believes that we can't let them grow any further, and should disband them as soon as possible. That's why I came up with this idea. All the other sects think the same way." "Oh," Li Mengbai nodded and asked again, "Then why did I hear that Yu Qianqiu didn't provoke our Deluo sect back in the 100 Flowers Valley? But you always went against Yu Qianqiu." "This disciple did not go against Yu Qianqiu. I only fought for the interests of our sect. This is my duty," Zhu Xianxian said with some fear. Zhu Zhao, who was standing to the side, took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "As the head of our sect's external affairs, you should fight for the interests of our sect. This is the right thing to do. Remember this in the future." His words affirmed Zhu Xianxian's contribution. "Yes, this disciple will remember," Zhu Xianxian said sincerely. Zhu Zhao was his uncle. If it weren't for this uncle, he wouldn't have been able to become the external manager of the Deluo sect. Zhu Zhao's words were clearly helping him out of this predicament. Li Mengbai glanced at the uncle and nephew, then exchanged glances with the other two consecrators, and said nothing more. Looking at the time, Yu Qianqiu and the others should have arrived by now. Whether or not Yu Qianqiu and Zhao Chang's disappearance was caused by him, we can ask him. After saying that, Zhu Zhao turned to Zhu Xianxian and asked, "Have there been any movements from Limitless Island recently?" "There hasn't been any big movement, but there are still reinforcements coming from time to time." Zhu Xianxian hesitated for a moment, then said, "There has been something strange recently. Corpses are constantly floating over from Wuji Island. After the various sects have fished them up and examined them, they have all dug pits and buried them. In the past few days, there have probably been more than 10,000 corpses." The four of them looked at each other. Zhu Zhao frowned and said, "Can you tell where they came from? Are they mortals or cultivators?" "They are all wearing Huaxia's clothing. Most of them are mortals, but those cultivators are the disciples of the various sects who were kidnapped in the previous battles. The main meridians of those mortals were severed. Clearly, they died from having their blood drained. As for those cultivators, they are even stranger. Holes have been dug out of their dantian, as if someone had taken away their core or nascent soul. This is really puzzling." Zhu Xianxian shook his head and said, "Something like this actually happened? Those people don't even let mortals go. What are they trying to do?" Luo Kuan said angrily. As they were talking, the sound of several flying artifacts piercing through the air came from afar. In the blink of an eye, 6 of them flew past the courtyard. Zhu Xianxian looked at the sky and said, "It should be Yu Qianqiu and the others." "That's good. Zhu Zhao sneered at them and said, "Let's go take a look at what this Yu Qianqiu looks like, the one who made our Daoyuo sect lose face. We can also ask him if what happened to Zhao Chong has anything to do with him." The few Daoyuo sect consecrators nodded in tacit agreement and walked outside together. Clearly, they all wanted to get to know this Yu Qianqiu. Zhu Xianxian, who was following behind them, sneered. "Since the 4 consecrators are personally coming, let's see where this Yu Qianqiu can run to now." Although the sect's defensive line was long, the main force was gathered in this Wanghai town. Due to the prominent terrain, it was suitable for observing the enemy. In addition, the mortals who lived here had been forcibly moved away, so it naturally became the first choice for the sects to stay. There was a large open space in the town. Originally, it was a place where the fishermen who fished by the sea gathered to dry and repair their nets. Now it had become a good place for the sects to gather manpower. At this moment, many people from the sects slowly walked out. Seeing the 6 strange flying artifacts land in the sky, everyone knew that Yu Qianqiu had arrived. Aside from wanting to see Yu Qianqiu, the 600 wandering cultivators were also the focus of everyone's attention. After all, many sects had paid a large amount of spirit stones for them. If they were really worth fighting for, many sects would not give up so easily. The leading flying artifact's hatch opened, and Yu Qianqiu slowly walked out with a dark expression. Behind him were the beauty of 100 charms and purple dress. The other flying artifacts did not move, and the 600 wandering cultivators did not come down either. Something was strange. More and more people gathered around. Yu Qianqiu looked around with a dark expression and sneered. He turned around and shouted, "Throw those Daoyuo sect guys out." Chapter 421. The various sects glanced at each other, then turned their gazes to the Daoyuo sect's side, a trace of doubt in their eyes. Could there be people from the Daoyuo sect on these 6 flying artifacts? The Daoyuo sect's representatives looked as if they had expected this. The disappearance of Zhao Chong and the others was indeed related to Yu Qianqiu. As long as they were still alive, everything was fine. However, they were afraid that Yu Qianqiu would destroy the evidence after killing them and refuse to admit to it. If that happened, even if they could find out the truth, it would take a lot of effort. Zhu Xianxian sneered. If the people who came out were really Zhao Chong and the others, then today's matter would be settled. With the 4 great reverends of the Daoyuo sect here, they would not let Yu Qianqiu get away scot-free again. As soon as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, 15 masked men in black flashed out from the cabin door behind him. Each of them had a person in their hands, and they threw them forward, causing them to cry out in pain. Everyone looked over and saw that these people were indeed wearing the uniform of the Daoyuo sect, and each of them was struggling weakly on the ground. One of them was covered in blood, and the most frightening thing was that all 4 of his limbs had been chopped off. At this moment, he was facing the Daoyuo sect's direction with his mouth wide open, howling in pain. From the look of grief and indignation on his face, it was clear that he had nowhere to vent his endless hatred. None of the people present were ordinary people, and their eyesight was far stronger than that of mortals. After a closer look, they were all shocked. The one who had lost all 4 limbs was actually Zhao Chong, a disciple of Reverend Luo Kuan of the Daoyuo sect. As for the other disciples, their cultivations had been crippled. Everyone was shocked. This Yu Qianqiu was too bold. After leaving people in such a state, he didn't even know to kill them, instead throwing them out in front of everyone. It seemed like their previous guess was correct. Yu Qianqiu must have known that the Daoyuo sect had come up with the idea to poach his people, and now he was here to take revenge. What a lunatic! Everyone from the Daoyuo sect paled. Zhu Xianxian even cried out in alarm, "Elder Zhao," and rushed over in a flash. The 15 black-clothed men did not need to be told. They all flashed in front of Yu Qianqiu, blocking Zhu Xianxian. Zhu Xianxian was well informed, so he naturally knew how powerful these masked men were. He stopped in his tracks and pointed at Yu Qianqiu, shouting, "Yu Qianqiu, how dare you treat my Daluo sect's disciple like this?" At this point, there was no need for the Daluo sect's people to call out to them. All of them quickly rushed over, and soon, Over 1,000 of them had arrived. Without saying a word, the 15 masked men released flying swords from their storage pouches and held them in their hands as they faced off against the 1,000 exalted sect disciples without the slightest fear. Zhu Xianxian turned around and saw so many Deluo sect disciples backing him up. His courage was boosted, and he jabbed his finger at Zhu Xianxian again. Yu Qianqiu, today is the day you die. All of you back off. At Yu Qianqiu's order, the 15 black-clothed men dragged the dozen or so Deluo sect disciples on the ground and quickly moved behind him. Yu Qianqiu's cold gaze swept across the Deluo sect, and he slowly took a few steps forward. Then he stepped on Zhao Chong, who was struggling and howling, so hard that he could barely move. How dare you? The Deluo sect's revered elders shouted in unison. Yu Qianqiu's actions were no different from slapping the Deluo sect's face in public. Zhu Xianxian's body moved. He wanted to go over and save Yu Qianqiu, but he saw Yu Qianqiu take out 2 big black sabers from his storage pouch. Zhu Xianxian jumped in fright. He forcefully stabilized himself and didn't rush over. You want to fight? Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow. The 2 sabers in his hands clashed, and the sound of metal clapping resounded through the air. It was neither wood nor metal, and no one could tell what rare material the sabers were made of. With the clapping of the sabers, the cabin doors of the flying magic artifacts all opened. Everyone's eyes widened, and more than 600 masked loose cultivators came out in an instant. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and glanced at them. It seemed that he had found the feeling of being the boss in his previous life, calling on his subordinates to fight. He had worked hard for so long, and this was the day he had been waiting for. He turned back to the Deluo sect and sneered. I'll play with you if you want to use force, but I still want to make things clear. Besides being a trustworthy person, I'm also a reasonable person. The various sects looked at the strength of both sides in shock. The Deluo sect had almost double the number of masked loose cultivators. There were nearly 100 tribulation stage cultivators, and 4 peak experts in the final stage. On the other hand, on Yu Qianqiu's side, more than 600 cultivators were all in the tribulation stage. The purple-clothed girl was also in the final stage. It was said that she had killed an expert of the same cultivation level in the 100 Flowers Valley. She could probably fight against 2 of them. The strength of both sides was completely on par. Seeing this, the various sects could not help but feel a little emotional. This guy had really grown. He had the strength to fight against the second largest sect of the Orthodox sections. Of course, this was only a portion of the Deluo sect's strength. It would be a joke if they thought that they could fight against the entire Deluo sect with just 600 people. How could a large sect that had stood in the cultivation world for thousands of years be shaken by a mere 600 tribulation stage cultivators? However, what the various sects did not know was that these 600 people were also a portion of Yu Qianqiu's strength. Utopia's army of nearly 10,000 was already preparing for battle. Once the time was ripe, Yu Qianqiu would probably attack the Deluo sect first. One was a powerful force that was out in the open, while the other was a huge army of cultivators hiding in the dark. Sooner or later, there would be a day when they would clash fiercely. Who would win and who would lose? Luo Kuan walked over slowly and pushed Zhu Xianxian behind him. After glancing at the grotesque Zhao Chong on the ground, he stared coldly at Yu Qianqiu and spat out 2 words. Release him. His attitude was very firm, and his meaning was very clear. I don't care if you want to fight or reason with me. Release him unconditionally first, or the consequences will be dire. The other 3 worshippers also walked over with ashen faces and stood beside Luo Kuan. When Zhu Zhao brushed past Zhu Xianxian, he also glared at him coldly. Clearly, he was blaming Zhu Zhao for weakening the prestige of the Deluo sect. Zhu Xianxian felt that he was wronged and lowered his head slightly. He thought to himself, don't you know the power of those 2 sabers? They have already defeated several tribulation stage cultivators. Moreover, if I charge forward, Yu Qianqiu will definitely kill me. I'm afraid that I won't be able to return even if I charge forward. Regardless of Zhu Xianxian's attitude, when the 4 Deluo sect experts in the late tribulation stage appeared, Their imposing manner immediately silenced the crowd. The atmosphere was very heavy. No one from the various sects came out to mediate. Yu Qianqiu had gone too far, and even the supporting Immortal Island was too embarrassed to step in. This had completely damaged the Deluo sect's reputation, and no one would be able to stop him. Seeing the four people appear, Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes slightly. He stabbed his sabers into the ground and cupped his fists. May I know who the four of you are from the Deluo sect? Release him. Luo Kuan spat out these two words in reply. His tone sounded like it was the final warning. The allure beauty behind Yu Qianqiu transmitted her voice. This person is Zhao Chang's master, Luo Kuan, a worshipper of the Deluo sect. The other three are also worshippers of the Deluo sect. They are all experts in the late tribulation stage. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and said expressionlessly, "So it's the four worshippers of the Deluo sect. I apologize for my lack of manners." The four of them immediately knew that someone had transmitted a message to Yu Qianqiu. Their gazes all fell on the 100 Charms beauty. Zhu Zhao shouted, "100 Charms beauty, your demon illusion palace has already been erased from the cultivation world. Why don't you behave yourself? Are you going to get involved in this matter?" The allure beauty smiled non-committally and immediately maintained her silence. Not speaking at this time meant that she was reserving some leeway. Perhaps it would be more advantageous for Yu Qianqiu to act when the opportunity arose. "Zi," Yu Qianqiu called out. Zi also understood the seriousness of the situation. She immediately teleported to his side and used her actions to show that she was in the late tribulation stage. The four people's pupils shrank slightly as they stared at her. Facing someone who could kill an expert in the late tribulation stage, no one dared to underestimate her. It seems that the four seniors of the Deluo sect want to teach us a lesson. I'll leave the four seniors to you. You just need to hold them off for a while, and I'll deal with the others. At that time I'll lend you a hand. No problem, right? Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. Yes. Zi nodded heavily. She glanced at the four people and took out the purplish-black bamboo. There was an uncontrollable excitement on her face. The various sects sucked in a breath of cold air. It seemed that this madman was going to clash head-on with the Daluo sect. At a time like this, when they were facing off against a foreign enemy, such a large-scale battle would be a loss for the Chinese cultivation world regardless of who won. Quan Deming of Fuxian Island finally couldn't help but shout, "Everyone, think of the big picture. If there's anything, we can talk it over. Since it has come to this, there's nothing to talk about." Zhu Zhao waved his hand at Quan Deming and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu die." His figure flashed, and he struck out with his palm. A huge palm shadow came crashing down. Zi, who was standing at the side, rushed forward and shouted, "Fight!" The purple bamboo in her hand also turned into a huge shadow. With a bang, the shadow of the palm shadow was destroyed. A strong airflow spread out. Damn it! It's that bullsh *T Deluo mountain splitting palm again. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. He thought that by showing off his strength, the other party would have some misgivings. Then he would be able to talk his way out of this. Who knew that the other party wouldn't just let this matter rest, and would rather make it bigger? Since that's the case, what else is there to say? I'm not afraid. Without another word, Yu Qianqiu dragged his saber with both hands and directly split Zhao Chang, who was under his feet, into two. Then he pointed his saber forward and shouted, "Kill!" With Yu Qianqiu as an example, the dozen disciples of the Deluo sect were instantly killed on the spot. More than 600 masked men quickly divided into small combat teams and neatly charged into the enemy's group. Luo Kuan and the other two were also shocked. They didn't expect Zhu Zhao to attack just like that. He didn't even greet the three of them. But since the enemy had already launched a large-scale attack, they naturally had to protect their own side first. The three of them quickly exchanged glances and immediately shot up into the sky, rushing into the group of 600 masked loose cultivators. 6 palms flashed and flashed as fast as shadows. Like a gust of wind, the three of them consecutively killed more than 10 people. The dozen screams made Yu Qianqiu's heart skip a beat. He didn't think much of Zi and the late-stage tribulation passing expert, But he didn't expect the late-stage tribulation passing expert to be so terrifying. Killing early-stage tribulation passing experts was as easy as taking something out of one's pocket. Watching the dozen members fall from the sky and die, he immediately shouted, "Don't bother with the 3 of them. The others are your targets." As soon as these words came out, a few more people fell from the sky. But after hearing this warning, the special forces immediately stopped risking their lives to fight the 3. Instead, they pounced into the group of Deluo sect disciples and started a frenzied massacre. Screams rang out everywhere as the Deluo sect disciples fiercely counterattacked. However, as soon as the battle started, the Deluo sect disciples realized that their side had more than 1,000 people. But they didn't seem to have more than 600 people on their side. It seemed as if they were surrounded by masked men in black, and they were being attacked from all directions. Just as they tried to deal with them, a flying sword suddenly pierced through their chest, and they fell to the ground with a look of disbelief on their faces. And when they attacked, the enemy seemed to have people helping them everywhere, so they didn't have to worry about their rear being exposed. As soon as they attacked, someone would immediately deflect their flying sword, and then they would be attacked for no reason. Up in the sky, Luo Kuan and the other 2 glanced at the scene below and immediately felt their hearts skip a beat. Although the masked men in black could not withstand a single blow from them, they were like hungry wolves charging into a flock of sheep when they charged into the Deluo sect disciples. The Deluo sect disciples had no way of fighting back against the flawless teamwork of the other party. The masked man in black constantly changed the most advantageous formation. His attacks and defenses were balanced as he slaughtered the Deluo sect disciples wantonly, killing them one by one. In an instant, 200 to 300 of the nearly 1,000 Deluo sect disciples fell, and the rest fell into a state of panic and fear. Faced with such a sharp combination of attacks, they were unable to organize an effective attack, and in an instant blood and flesh flew everywhere. The various sects were dumbfounded, and they looked at each other. They didn't expect the 600 people under Yu Qianqiu to be so powerful. Why did it seem as if every one of them had been through hundreds of battles? In this exchange, the Deluo sect suffered great losses. Both sides of the massacre were from the Cultivation Alliance. The various sects were worried, but they couldn't help either side. Luo Kuan and the other 2 were stunned for a moment, and another 200 Deluo sect disciples fell. In just a short period of time, almost half of the disciples had lost their lives. How could this be? The 3's expressions changed, and without hesitation, they took out their flying swords from their storage bags. Luo Kuan shouted, "You 2 deal with those loose cultivators, I'll eliminate them." Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai quickly flashed to the sky above the battlefield. The flying swords hovering in the air were as fast as lightning, rising and falling towards the masked men in black below. Luo Kuan, on the other hand, glared at Yu Qianqiu. The latter was slightly shocked, and thought to himself, so the so-called elimination was referring to me. Z. Finish the battle quickly, kill the opponent, and help our brothers get rid of the other 2, shouted Yu Qianqiu as he glanced at the Special Forces offensive. With the addition of 2 experts in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage, not only did the Special Forces suffer more casualties, but their attacking formation was also in chaos. If this continued, the entire team would be wiped out. Zhu Zhao was already in a difficult situation, and Yu Qianqiu's shout was simply asking for his life. Ziyi immediately unleashed the great art of teleportation to the extreme. The purple bamboo she controlled flickered in and out of sight, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. No matter how hard Zhu Zhao tried, he couldn't get rid of the opponent. It was as if he was possessed by a ghost, and he could only barely defend himself. He felt like his life was hanging by a thread. He anxiously shouted, "Luo Kuan, quickly come and help me." Luo Kuan was about to kill Yu Qianqiu, but when he heard Ziyi's shout, he was immediately shocked. To the sect, losing 1 expert in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage was a great loss. How could they not save him? He immediately teleported over and fought Ziyi with Zhu Zhao's dual swords. "Ziyi, hold on!" Yu Qianqiu roared. He turned his head and stared at the 2 experts in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage, who were trying to kill the members of the special forces. A ruthless and cruel aura appeared on his face. He threw the broadswords in his hands into his storage bag, and with a flick of his sleeves, black shadows started to appear. The green flying swords that he used to use were now abandoned, and were replaced by black flying swords. Chapter 422. When Yen Bugue brought people to the 100 Flowers Valley to challenge, many people had seen Yu Qianqiu's thousands of green flying swords. They were quite powerful. The strange whip that everyone was helpless against was defeated by his flying swords. Yen Cheng, who was in the middle stage of tribulation passing, was even killed by his flying swords. Now a black flying sword had appeared. Since he could use it in this battle, it must be even more powerful. Currently, the situation of the battle had been turned around by the 4 experts in the late stage of tribulation passing. Once Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai used their flying swords, the 600 masked rogue cultivators immediately suffered heavy losses. As the leader, Yu Qianqiu couldn't wait any longer. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, thousands of flying swords covered the sky and covered the earth as they wrapped around him and directly pounced towards Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai. All the sects were shocked. This guy actually wanted to fight against 2 experts in the late stage of tribulation passing alone. He was a complete lunatic. The people of the supporting Immortal Island had an inseparable affection for Yu Qianqiu. When they saw this scene, they all shook their heads and remained silent. Osihai even sighed. The good seedling that he had taken a fancy to was probably going to die here. No one thought that Yu Qianqiu could survive the attacks of 2 experts in the late stage of tribulation passing. Bai Shan of the 4 clans turned around and sent a telepathic message. The disciples of the 4 clans quickly gathered and were ready to help as soon as the order was given. Seeing this, all the sects cursed inwardly. The 4 clans were probably going to help Yu Qianqiu. Hua Rui and Hua Yingyue of the Moon clan looked at each other and nodded slightly. Their attention was not on Yu Qianqiu, but on the 2 people in purple in the sky. The smile on the Allure Beauty's face disappeared. She raised her hand and stroked her hair. A few experts in the tribulation passing from the pink cult also took a step forward and waited for the order. "I'm coming," Yu Qianqiu roared. The flying sword swirled like snow as he waved his hand. With a flick of his finger, the flying swords pledged their loyalty to him. Hundreds of streaks of black light split into 2 groups and charged towards Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan at lightning speed. Yu Qianqiu was throwing caution to the wind. It was impossible for him to let the first batch of brothers who followed him into battle be annihilated. Now that his cultivation had just broken through to the middle stage of nascent soul, his ability to control his flying sword had once again increased. He had to fight with his life on the line. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai had already noticed his movements. Seeing the flying swords flying towards them like rain, they instantly covered their bodies with protective stellar energy. The 2 of them were confident that with their cultivation, they could completely block Yu Qianqiu's attack. However, the 2 of them weren't completely at the mercy of the other party's attacks. One of them controlled the flying swords below to slaughter the masked rogue cultivators, while the other struck out with a palm. The Daluo mountain splitting palm of the Daluo sect instantly conjured 2 giant palm silhouettes to meet the 2 waves of sword rain. The flying sword was like a sharp arrow, and the palm shadow was like a bubble. When the 2 met, it was like a knife cutting through tofu. The palm energy was immediately broken by the flying sword. As expected, it could break through the stellar energy of a late-stage tribulation stage cultivator. Yu Qianqiu was invigorated, and his confidence was greatly boosted. He then controlled the flying sword to rapidly shoot towards the 2 Daluo sect consecrators. The hundreds of black flying swords that were protecting him also carried him as he charged towards them. "Oh no, there's something strange about these swords," Cui Zhaofan cried out involuntarily. "They can break through stellar energy. Let's go." Li Mingbai's expression changed. The 2 of them shouted at the same time. In order not to affect their speed, they instantly retracted their stellar energy and soared into the sky. The 2 flying swords that had caused the masked rogue cultivators to suffer greatly also immediately flashed into the sky, chasing after their masters. Without the threat of the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators, the masked rogue cultivators had suffered heavy casualties, and there were only about 400 of them left. However, their long battle experience in Utopia was very effective. They calmly and quickly formed a team to counterattack the Daluo sect. Yu Qianqiu pounced towards the spot where the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators had been standing. He looked down and saw that the number of casualties had reached a third. He instantly felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. These were all his efforts over the years. He couldn't help but roar crazily. Kill! 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 Don't leave a single one alive. Kill them all. You two old bastards, where do you think you're going? Give me your lives. Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately turned bloodshot. He pointed at the two people flying into the sky and shouted. Then, thousands of black flying swords carried him into the sky and chased after the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators. The smell of desperation was very strong. When the masked rogue cultivators below saw that their leader had single-handedly defeated the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators, they were instantly energized. They immediately followed their leader's orders to kill them all and started a frenzied massacre. There was no lack of intention to take revenge for their teammates. The various sects were shocked. Yu Qianqiu had actually scared away the two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators from the Daluo sect. Now, he was flying into the sky alone to continue his pursuit. He was really crazy. Oh my. After this battle, if Yu Qianqiu was still alive, even if he didn't have the cultivation of a late-stage tribulation stage cultivator, he would definitely be ranked among them. Not because of anything else, but because of his strength. After the people of Supporting Immortal Island recovered from their shock, they looked at each other and shook their heads with bitter smiles. Now they understood that Supporting Immortal Island had abandoned a disciple with the potential to reach the late-stage tribulation stage. Moreover, he had killed two late-stage tribulation stage cultivators while he was only at the nascent soul stage. Although it was hard to believe it was the truth, Supporting Immortal Island had suffered a heavy loss. Yu Qianqiu had used the improved Good Yuan sword art to establish his might in the cultivation world several times. Could it be that the tens of thousands of cultivators of Supporting Immortal Island were inferior to Yu Qianqiu? The research and improvement of the Good Yuan sword art could not be delayed. The higher-ups of Supporting Immortal Island nodded firmly. Bai Shan and the others from the four major clans were also surprised, but they weren't too surprised. The disciple of the world's #1 expert was not someone to be trifled with. Everyone finally heaved a sigh of relief. The Allure Beauty looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was holding a sword and chasing after Yu Qianqiu, and her eyes lit up. She didn't expect such a scene to occur. This guy was really unfathomable and always exceeded her expectations. It seemed that her worries were unnecessary. Zi had no problem fighting Zhu Zhao alone. She believed that it wouldn't take long for her to succeed. However, Luo Kuan's participation immediately made Zhu Zhao feel better. It was also impossible for the two of them to defeat Zi. Putting aside the fact that Nong Zhu had trained her daughter, Nong Zhu's famous form displacement transposition technique in the cultivation world was not something that could be practiced for fun. Zi and Luo Kuan had a headache because Zi didn't fight them head-on. Relying on her strange body movement technique, she appeared and disappeared unpredictably. The two of them could only guard against her, and it was difficult for them to fight back effectively. Zi was originally worried about Yu Qianqiu's safety. At this time, when she saw Yu Qianqiu, a nascent soul stage cultivator, chasing after two cultivators at the final stage of the Crossing Calamity stage, she was shocked and attributed all the credit to Bai Changchun. She admired Bai Changchun more and more. She thought that the disciple taught by Senior Bai was really extraordinary. Without any worries for the time being, Zi was immediately stimulated by Yu Qianqiu to the point that it was as if she had been injected with chicken blood. She used the great art of displacement transposition perfectly, immediately forcing Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao into an indescribably miserable state. The two of them had their backs against each other, and only then did they have one side of their defense reduced. Only then did they feel a little more relaxed. However, when they saw that Yu Qianqiu was also fighting 1 against 2, the two of them didn't know what to say. Zhu Zhao was so regretful that his intestines turned green. In order to stand up for his disappointing nephew, he had dragged the entire Deluo sect down with him. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai stopped high in the sky. With their cultivations, Yu Qianqiu naturally couldn't catch up. However, as the two of them were the highest echelons of the Deluo sect, they couldn't do that. If they really did that, the Deluo sect would be too ashamed to show their faces in public. Seeing that the two of them had stopped running and were preparing for battle, Yu Qianqiu also calmed down. He slowed down his speed and quickly set up his formation. Half of the flying swords were inserted outwards, densely distributed around his body, making him look like a hedgehog. He wasn't afraid of anything now, but he was afraid that the two cultivators at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage could use teleportation to ambush him. This ability to come and go without a trace was too terrifying. However, teleportation could only be used if there was space for them to move. Without the spatial crack that they used to teleport over, no matter how they tried to teleport, they would only be able to stop outside of his sword formation. After setting up his formation, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt more at ease. As long as he had a bit of buffer time, escaping would not be a problem. He immediately shouted, "Hand over your life!" Yu Qianqiu commanded the remaining hundreds of flying swords to charge at the two of them. This guy kept asking the two of them to hand over their lives. The cultivators below were not deaf. Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai's faces turned ashen. They were probably angry out of humiliation. Cui Zhaofan stared at the pursuing Yu Qianqiu and sneered, "You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. If you want to die, don't blame me for being impolite." With a point of his finger, the flying sword that was floating beside him moved according to his heart's desire. It spun in the air and suddenly created an illusionary shadow of a sword intent. The entire sword seemed to have expanded by 12 times. With a whoosh, it pierced through the air. Its strong momentum caused visible ripples to form in the air as it charged straight at Yu Qianqiu. His attack when he was enraged was indeed extraordinary. Oh my! The final stage of the crossing calamity stage is indeed the final stage of the crossing calamity stage. Black fire flying sword. I will be relying on you to gain face. Don't let me down. Yu Qianqiu made up his mind and pointed his finger at the sky as well. He shouted, "Kill." 100 black rays flashed out and twisted into a flood dragon that soared into the sky. It wanted to compete with the heavens. It soared into the sky and faced the huge flying sword that was creating a huge ripple. The various sects below raised their heads and squinted their eyes to watch. They were speechless. It was hard to tell if Cui Zhaofan's profound cultivation had the upper hand, or if Yu Qianqiu's black flying sword was sharper. Li Mingbai looked over with a solemn expression. It was really strange that the flying sword could break through stellar qi. If there was an accident, he did not mind being the laughingstock of two cultivators at the end of the tribulation passing stage, fighting against a nascent soul cultivator. The Deluo sect disciples below had almost all died. Only the tribulation passing stage cultivators were barely holding on. It seemed like they would not be able to hold on for much longer. None of the four of them could bear the crime of being completely wiped out. Moreover, Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao were also barely holding on. He raised his hand, and the flying sword beside him landed in his hand. He then clenched it tightly. As soon as the gigantic flying sword collided with the dense black sword shadows, the dense black shadows immediately disappeared into the gigantic sword, making an ear-piercing SSA sound. Cui Zhaofan, who was mentally connected to his flying sword, had a change of expression. The huge sword was instantly shattered. It could no longer withstand such a huge force. With a loud bang, it exploded into pieces in the air. Chapter 423. The Black Netherworld Fire, that even Old Man Bai could not break through, was indeed extraordinary. It destroyed the flying swords of the late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators. Yu Qianqiu was very pleased. He immediately charged up while facing the flying swords. His aura was very arrogant. Li Mengbai snorted coldly. She waved her sword and a sharp light shot out. She then quickly slashed out more than 10 times. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu, who was rushing up, was instantly shocked. He realized that he was a little too excited. He only dreamed of defeating the late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators. But he might lose his life if he was not careful. He moved his sword horizontally, controlling hundreds of flying swords to meet the other's sharp sword light. The black flame flying swords were indeed powerful. Pew. They instantly destroyed more than 10 sharp sword lights. Yu Qianqiu's heart was beating rapidly. Just as he heaved a sigh of relief, he suddenly realized that Li Mengbai had disappeared from above. He saw a shadow appear from the corner of his eyes. The word teleportation immediately appeared in his mind. He was shocked again and hurriedly flew up on his sword. Running, Li Mengbai snorted coldly and shouted, "Stop him. Don't let him escape." Cui Zhaofan's expression darkened. He summoned another sword. The sword from before could be considered a transcendent artifact, but it was destroyed just like that. Although he could not control so many flying swords at the same time like Yu Qianqiu, he could still take out a few spare flying swords from his storage pouch. With the previous lesson, he had learned his lesson. He no longer used his flying swords to fight against Yu Qianqiu. Just like Li Mengbai, he shot out a sword light every time he attacked. The two of them, one above the other, shot out a sword light while the other shot out a sword light. Immediately, Yu Qianqiu was forced into a corner. The two of them watched as he used his flying swords to surround himself like a porcupine. Such a strange arrangement. If it wasn't to guard against the two's teleportation, what else could it be? Since he had the confidence to use these flying swords to defend himself, there must be a reason. The two of them did not force their way through, but the sword lights they shot out became more and more frequent. If this continued, there would come a time when Yu Qianqiu would fail to block it. Of course, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't just sit there and wait to be beaten. He had plenty of flying swords anyway, and it was enough for each person to use a dozen or so to harass them. However, the speed of his flying swords couldn't keep up with the speed of the two people moving through the air. It was true that he could only harass them, but he couldn't cause any damage to them. Just like that, the three of them began to drag it out. You release sword light to harass me. I release flying swords to harass you. However, at this rate, with Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, he might not be able to last as long as the two of them. However, Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan were feeling extremely anxious. There weren't many Deluo sect disciples left. If this were to continue, all of them would die. If Yu Qianqiu's subordinates were to kill all of them, they would be too ashamed to return to the Deluo sect. However, this Yu Qianqiu was like a porcupine, making it impossible for them to exert any force. No matter how high their cultivation was, they had to find a way to attack. Attacking with flying swords was impossible. The other party had as many flying swords as there were hairs on a cow, and all of them were terrifyingly sharp. They could cut through transcendent artifacts like vegetables, and even their astral energy and sword light could be disintegrated. Teleportation was also impossible to get close to, so there was no way to find an effective way to attack. It was hard to imagine how a single person could have so many sharp flying swords on him. It was simply illogical. The various sects below watched as the Deluo sect disciples were almost completely wiped out. The few dozen mid-stage tribulation transcendence disciples were clenching their teeth and holding on. But under the combined attacks of the other party, they didn't dare to go all out. However, they had gained some experience. Against this group of masked rogue cultivators, the only thing they could do was to stick together and defend. If they tried to retaliate too much, the other party would immediately take advantage of them. Below them, there were many people with low cultivation, and very few people with high cultivation. The various sects looked up and saw that the situation was completely reversed. There were many people with high cultivation, and very few people with low cultivation. Two late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators took turns to trap Yu Qianqiu and attacked fiercely, but they couldn't do anything to him. Alright. On the other side, Zi was even better. She was fighting with fewer people against more people. One late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivator was actually trapping two late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators, and Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao could only defend themselves. What made the various sects the most speechless was that Yu Qianqiu was obviously only at the nascent soul stage. He even needed to step on a sword to fly, yet he was fighting with two late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators. This completely overturned everyone's perception. However, everyone could see that it wasn't that Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai weren't Yu Qianqiu's opponents. It was all because the black flying swords were too powerful, and the two of them were afraid to attack. If Yu Qianqiu dared to abandon the black flying swords, either one of them would be able to kill him with a single slap. How could they let him jump around in the sky for so long? It was time-consuming and embarrassing. Keep an eye on him. I'll go deal with the rogue cultivators below, Li Mingbai said to Cui Zhaofan. She felt that there was no need to waste the two of them here. Even if there was only one of them, they wouldn't be able to do anything to each other. It would be a waste for her to waste time here. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he was shocked. If that guy went down, no one in the special forces would be able to resist him. If they fought head-on, none of them would be a match for a late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivator. He immediately shouted, "Nebula Water Art." He casually came up with a frightening name. As expected, it caused the two of them to be shocked at the same time. They instantly thought that this guy seemed to have two special skills that he hadn't used yet. They immediately became vigilant. Neither of them left. The Nebula Fire Art was a famous name that the entire cultivation world had heard of. It was said that no one had been able to gain an advantage over that fire art. When Luo Qingtian returned to Deluo sect after he was injured, he once told the higher-ups of Deluo sect that Yu Qianqiu's fire art was extremely overbearing. Once he came into contact with it, he wouldn't be able to withstand it even if he hid within his protective qi. He was forced to self-destruct his protective qi to escape. As for the Nebula Water Art, this was the first time they had heard of it. However, it was an indisputable fact that Yu Qianqiu could indeed control water to fight. Even though he had only used it once, many people had witnessed it with their own eyes. Moreover, the only time it was used was when the Daluo sect master, Luo Qingtian, tried it. Luo Qingtian tasted Yu Qianqiu's water and fire secret arts alone, and no one knew if it was a blessing or a curse. Now that the Nebula Water Art had suddenly appeared, not only did it cause Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan to become vigilant, even the various sects below them became interested. Everyone knew that the duel between Yu Qianqiu and Luo Qingtian was on the river that day, so it was needless to say that there was water. Could it be that the water conjuration art could appear out of thin air like the fire conjuration art? Everyone subconsciously looked at the vast sea not far away. Yu Qianqiu stuffed 2 big handfuls of qi replenishing pills into his mouth and chewed them like candy. In the end, the sects waited for a long time, but they didn't find anything unusual. The people above them were still hammering away, hitting each other. They couldn't hit each other, and neither could they hit each other. However, 2 more screams came from below. 2 Daluo sect disciples had made a mistake, and the masked loose cultivator took advantage of the gap and killed them on the spot. Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan's expressions changed at the same time. The latter said to the former in a low voice, "This guy is stalling for time. You go down there, leave this to me." Li Mingbai fiercely slashed out a sword ray. Just as she was about to go down, she suddenly realized that something was wrong with her surroundings. It was slightly hazy, and the air instantly became abnormally moist. The two of them said at the same time, "Nebula Water Art?" The moment these words came out, it immediately attracted the attention of the various sects below. Instantly, their eyes widened like eggs, and their heads tilted up and down for a long time. However, they couldn't find a single drop of water. Are our eyes playing tricks on us? Or are those 2 guys hallucinating? The various sects looked at each other, and all shook their heads to indicate that they didn't see anything. Li Mingbai and Cui Zhaofan's nerves tensed up for a long time. They realized that the surrounding air was indeed moist, but there was no water. The two of them simultaneously stared at Yu Qianqiu. only to see that this guy had a serious expression on his face. He was completely focused on dealing with the sword rays that the two of them had released. The two of them immediately felt like they had been tricked. Cui Zhaofan gritted his teeth and said, "Go. A mere water art won't be able to do anything to me. Yu Qianqiu, wait for me to kill all of them down there, then I'll deal with." Li Mengbai's words came to an abrupt halt. Yu Qianqiu clenched his fists and immediately, a few water dragons coiled around his arms, swimming around in the air. Yu Qianqiu also knew that he could only drag things out for a while, but not forever. It was time to give it his all. Old Man Bai had once said that if one used it well, they would be invincible. He then shouted, "Then I'll let you see my nebula water art." With a shake of his arms, boundless water surged out, and the air instantly became bright. Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan realized that they were instantly trapped in the water, and the water was desperately trying to enter their orifices. The two of them were shocked, and immediately released their stellar energy to protect their bodies. The various sects below were in an uproar. A large area of water had really appeared out of nowhere, covering a radius of a few hundred meters. Everyone had originally thought that he was going to borrow the water of the Eastern Sea. Yu Qianqiu was in the water, and immediately realized the beauty of this technique. It was as if the radius of a few hundred meters was under his control. Even if he closed his eyes, he would be able to clearly see the actions of his two opponents. It seemed like the benefits of having a higher cultivation level were not small. This was wonderful. Yu Qianqiu chuckled, and the surrounding water quickly became turbulent. Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan immediately realized that they could not see the movements around them at all. They instantly felt that something was wrong, and quickly released their divine senses. Ah! The moment the two of them released their divine senses, they immediately felt as if they were being pierced by a group of things. The feedback was not a piercing pain, but an unforgettable burning pain. The pain penetrated into their souls, and no matter how high their cultivation levels were, they could not help but let out a miserable howl. The people below were also unable to see the movements above them, because of the turbulence of the water. Suddenly, they heard two miserable howls, and immediately determined that it was Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai. Everyone was shocked. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu had already succeeded? Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao clenched their teeth and defended with all their might. When they suddenly heard these two miserable howls, they immediately felt their limbs go numb. The two of them could naturally tell whose voice it was. For a cultivator at the final stage of the tribulation to let out such a miserable howl, the result was unimaginable. Immediately, the two of them relaxed their defense. Hearing this, Zi became even more excited, and took the opportunity to attack ferociously. Zhu Zhao was careless for a moment, and the bamboo immediately pierced a hole through his thigh. Just as blood spurted out, he circulated his energy to stop it. Zhu Zhao was really stubborn. He was afraid that he would affect Luo Kuan, so he forcefully endured and did not make a sound. Instead, he became even more alert and defended with all his might. Outsiders might not know what was going on over at Yu Qianqiu's side, but he knew that Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai's divine senses had already been severely injured by his black flame flying swords. This time, it was not like the time when he fought with Luo Qingtian, where he only used a finger of black flame to lightly touch them. Instead, hundreds of flying swords rushed into their divine senses and messed them up. It was definitely enough to make them suffer. Seizing the opportunity, hundreds of flying swords shot towards the two of them. However, since Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai could cultivate to the final stage of the tribulation, they were not to be trifled with. How could they hesitate after suffering such an attack? Almost at the same time, they instinctively exploded their protective auras. Boom boom, two loud sounds rang out like thunder. The water clouds within a radius of a few hundred meters in the sky exploded. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt dizzy from such a loud sound. The water clouds lost control, and all turned into flowing water, splashing into the sea. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and regained his senses. His ears were still ringing, but he immediately realized that the two of them were staring at him like tigers watching their prey. He was immediately shocked, and quickly summoned back the black flame flying swords to protect himself. However, what surprised him was that the two of them were staring at him with pale faces, but they did not make any movements. Yu Qianqiu's face was filled with suspicion, but he did not dare to act rashly. He did not know what the two of them were up to. Moreover, his ears were still ringing, so it was better for him to slow down. Cui Xiaofan and Li Mengbai, on the other hand, were suffering in silence. Their divine senses had been severely damaged. Other than their natal primordial spirits, the divine senses that could be released had already been destroyed by Yu Qianqiu. The remaining divine senses were pitifully little, and they had almost become idiots due to the damage to their divine senses. Now the two of them were extremely mentally exhausted, and they were almost in a state of drowsiness. How could they still have the energy to continue wasting time with Yu Qianqiu? This symptom made the two of them recall what Luo Qingtian had said. Back when he was fighting with Yu Qianqiu, his divine sense was suddenly injured. Although the injury wasn't serious, that kind of heart-wrenching pain was simply unforgettable. It almost made people want to die instantly. Now that he thought about it, the symptoms were exactly the same as what Luo Qingtian had said. It was just that the degree of damage to their divine senses was much more severe than Luo Qingtian's. The three of them continued wasting time in the air. Li Mengbai and Cui Xiaofan took the opportunity to rest, hoping to recover some of the damaged divine senses. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, was used to scheming against others. He was suspicious and afraid that others would scheme against him, so he decided to observe first. He did not want to act rashly. Because of his suspicious nature, he had lost a great opportunity for nothing. The spectators below were puzzled. The battle had already reached this stage, so what was there to hesitate about? They were not going to persuade him anymore. Just end the battle quickly, and end it quickly. What was the point of continuing to waste time? At this moment, a few disciples ran over from the small town. They quickly went to the spectator sects and reported something to the people in charge. The expressions of the people in charge of the righteous paths Fuxian Island, Moon Clan, Sword Clan, and Heartless Palace all changed. They looked at Yu Qianqiu, Li Mengbai, and the others who were in a stalemate in the air. The people of the four sects exchanged glances and nodded. They shouted in unison, "Stop." As soon as they shouted, more than 10 experts in the final stage of the tribulation realm shot out from the four sects and blocked between Yu Qianqiu and the other two. Yu Qianqiu quickly looked around and squinted his eyes. He said in an extremely cold tone, "What? Could it be that the righteous path is colluding to deal with me?" Chapter 424. The movement of the righteous immediately alerted the demonic sections. Although they were all in the Cultivation Alliance, there was still a division between righteous and demonic sections. It was best if they didn't suffer any losses. There was no need to say anything. The demonic sects exchanged glances, and a dozen late-stage tribulation passing experts soared into the sky. The righteous sects, including Daoyuo sect, had 5 sections. The demonic sects also had 5 sections. They stood in the sky. Niu, son of 10,000 demons, said expressionlessly, "The matter of Yu Qianqiu and Daoyuo sect has troubled you all. Lu Qing, what is the meaning of this?" Lu Qing was the consecrator of Fuxian Island. He waved his hand and said, "Niu, son, don't misunderstand. Daoyuo sect sent a message to the 4 sects, asking us to stop this fight. We just received the sect master's decree, and we don't have any other intentions." The demonic sects didn't say anything. They believed this. Daoyuo sect must have noticed that the situation was bad, and sent a message back to the sect. They didn't stop it at first, probably thinking that they would gain an advantage. Who knew that they would be at a disadvantage? Daoyuo sect couldn't send people over, so they sent a message to the 4 sects, asking them to send a decree to the people in Wanghai town. "Why didn't you stop it earlier? Why now?" Yu Qianqiu sneered. He was a smart person, and could see through the trick at a glance. "We don't know about that. After receiving the decree from the sect, we immediately came here," Lu Qing said. Niu Sun sized up Li Mengbai and Cui Xiaofan. Suddenly, he looked at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. He thought to himself, "Those two are clearly showing signs of exhaustion." I'm afraid it will be difficult for them to make a move. This brat is famous for not being at a disadvantage. Why would he give up such a great opportunity? Strange. He didn't think about it. With Yu Qianqiu's current cultivation, he couldn't see through the late-stage tribulation passing experts. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so lucky. He would definitely pounce on them and slaughter them. After the group of cultivators at the end of the tribulation transcendence stage looked at Li Mengbai and Cui Zhaofan, they seemed to be deep in thought. They all stared at Yu Qianqiu in silence. No one had revealed the truth. It all depended on Yu Qianqiu's decision. Yu Qianqiu was in the middle of a group of people at the end of the tribulation transcendence stage. When he saw everyone looking at him with a strange expression, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt the pressure on him increase. He looked at Purple Dress and realized that it would be difficult for him to succeed in a short period of time. It was the same for the special forces below. Since none of you are speaking, then let's just waste time. Yu Qianqiu was on high alert. In any case, Purple Dress and the special battle team below them had the upper hand. If he could buy more time, he might be able to kill a few of them. It would be even better if he could kill one at the end of the tribulation stage. He wanted to waste time, but the righteous sects did not want to waste time with him. Everyone had come under the sect leader's decree. Afterwards, they would have to report the completion of the task. Lu Qing of Supporting Immortal Island said, Yu Qianqiu, tell your people to stop. Now is the time to unite against the outsiders. Why must you kill them all? Isn't it better to save energy to deal with the outsiders? With so many powerful people gathered, Yu Qianqiu knew that he could not delay any longer. He curled his lips unwillingly and said, Tell the people from Daoyuo sect to stop first. Once they stop, my people will naturally stop as well. Lu Qing looked down and frowned. He said, The people from Daoyuo sect are defending, and your people are attacking. How can you tell the people from Daoyuo sect to stop first? If they stop, isn't it the same as seeking death? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He looked down and realized that it was indeed the case. If the people from Daoyuo sect stopped, the special battle team would instantly slaughter them all. He thought that it was a pity, but there was nothing he could do about it. There was a group of powerful people here. Then he shouted, Purple Dress, come back, stop fighting. When Purple Dress heard this, she immediately recalled her purple bamboo and teleported to Yu Qianqiu's side. She said with a surprised expression, Why are you stopping? Give me another half an hour, and I'll definitely kill those two. She didn't look like she was satisfied with the fight. The various sects were speechless. They did not expect this woman to be so belligerent. Yu Qianqiu said, Go back down. Z-Dress had no choice but to follow him back to the ground. Stop attacking and prepare for battle. With Yu Qianqiu's order, even if the special battle team had doubts, they would not ask them out loud like Z-Dress. They immediately teleported back, but they were still on guard. The people from Daoyuo sect were also huddled together, not daring to relax. Clearly, they were afraid of being beaten up. The people from the various sects in the final phase of tribulation transcendence also teleported down. They stood between the two sides to prevent them from accidentally fighting again. Luo Kuan and Zhu Zhao carried Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai back to Daoyuo sect's side. Luo Kuan said in a low voice, Stop fighting. Only then did the people from Daoyuo sect believe that it was over. They all relaxed as if they had just survived a disaster. Especially Zhu Xianxian, who was hiding in the middle of a few dozen people. He was still in shock. Of all the people in the early phase of tribulation transcendence, he was the only one who survived. Fortunately, a group of people had been protecting him for Zhu Zhao's sake. The Allure Beauty leisurely walked over. Suddenly, she noticed that Yu Qianqiu was gritting his teeth. She could not help but ask, What's wrong? I was tricked. Yu Qianqiu stared at the pale-faced Cui Zhaofan and Li Mengbai, who were being supported by two disciples. Only now did he realize that those two fellows had already reached such a stage. Just now, they were barely holding on, but he had wasted such a good opportunity. Now that he understood, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. This was too vexing. The people in the final phase of tribulation transcendence in the middle naturally understood what he meant, but they all pretended as if nothing had happened. In their hearts, they were also sighing at how lucky Cui Zhaofan and Li Mingbai were. To be able to survive this guy's attack was truly a miracle. The Luo sect, please return first. Lu Qing cupped his hands at Luo Kuan. Luo Kuan's face was ashen as he returned the greeting. Then, he ordered his disciples to collect the corpses of the dead disciples. Not long after, there were only 200 corpses of the special forces left on the plaza. When the people in the final phase of tribulation transcendence saw Yu Qianqiu staring at the corpses on the ground with twitching expressions, they exchanged glances and silently dispersed. There was nothing left for them to do here. The 400 or so special forces who were still alive remained silent. Ziyi's face was also filled with solemnity. The Allure Beauty's gaze shifted to Yu Qianqiu. Seeing that his face was flushed red, and the veins on his neck could already be seen bulging, it was clear that he was extremely angry. Collect the corpses of our brothers onto the fourth flying artifact, Yu Qianqiu said word by word. The special forces dispersed. They silently picked up their comrades and quietly sent them onto the fourth flying artifact. The onlookers from the various sects looked at these masked rogue cultivators with admiration. Although there were only about 400 people left, almost all of them had died at the hands of the two cultivators in the final phase of tribulation transcendence. The Deluo sect had more than 1,000 people, and many of them were in the tribulation transcendence stage. However, almost all of them had been killed by these people, leaving only a few dozen alive. Yu Qianqiu silently walked toward the fourth flying artifact. Ziyi and the Allure Beauty followed behind him. However, when they were about to reach the cabin door, a group of masked rogue cultivators suddenly blocked their way, separating the two women from Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu didn't even turn his head, as if he didn't know anything. He walked in without even looking back. Only the two captains followed him in, and then the cabin door immediately closed. Why did you stop us? The Allure Beauty looked at the group of masked people in front of her and asked, "The Mr. wants to send the dead brothers home. Please don't disturb him," the person in front said indifferently. The Allure Beauty and Ziyi looked at each other, their faces filled with confusion. Inside the cabin, Yu Qianqiu looked at the over 200 corpses on the cabin's board without any expression on his face. He extended his palm and said indifferently, Go back to Utopia and rest in peace. I will use the entire Deluo sect as a sacrifice for you." He didn't say anything else. He released his divine senses, and the over 200 corpses instantly disappeared. In Utopia's military camp, after Guan Yu received the notice, he had already gathered everyone. Close to 10,000 people were waiting quietly. When over 200 corpses appeared, Guan Yu waved his hand, and a group of people came out. They silently removed the masked robes with the words Rogue Cultivator embroidered on them, and helped them change into Utopia's attire. Everyone bowed silently. After bowing, Guan Yu shouted, Hongqi Zhangpeng and Gu Qingyan stepped forward. After the three of them came to the other side, he continued, These 200 Special Forces members were sacrificed in an intense battle outside. The leader has specially requested for the three of you to personally give them a proper burial. Can you do it? Yes, the three of them said in unison. Guan Yu waved his hand. Carry it out immediately. Yu Qianqiu and the two team leaders were silent for a long time before they opened the cabin door and walked out. When they saw everyone again, they had already regained their composure. After putting away the two flying artifacts, they ordered all the team members to return to the remaining four. I'm going back, the Allure Beauty suddenly said to the two of them with a smile. Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi looked at each other and asked in surprise, Go back where? I can't help you much even if I stay by your side. Of course, I have to go back, the Allure Beauty said and nodded to the two of them. Then she turned around and left. Her smile was slightly bitter. She originally thought that she would be of great help if she stayed by Yu Qianqiu's side. However, during the battle just now, she realized that Ziyi could not only fight against two cultivators in the late stage of the Crossing Calamity stage, But even Yu Qianqiu could fight against 2 cultivators in the late stage of the crossing calamity stage alone. She immediately realized to her dismay that she was so useless. The members of the pink sect, who were not far away, quickly came to her. When they were a few meters away from her, they all bowed and said, "Greetings, sect leader." The Allure Beauty raised her hand to indicate that there was no need to be so polite. Then, she turned around and smiled at the 2 of them. Then, she left under the welcome of the pink sect members. Ziyi was surprised and said, "Isn't she the palace master of the illusion palace that was wiped out? How did she become the sect leader?" "It's called the west side is bright when the east side is dark. You don't understand," Yu Qianqiu replied casually. He didn't think that the Enchantress of 100 Charm would announce his identity so openly. Ziyi's pretty face immediately turned cold when she heard him say that she didn't understand. The onlookers were shocked. They did not expect the Allure Beauty to be the sect leader of the pink sect, which was ranked 10th in the demonic path. Then many people from the various sects left quickly. Obviously, they were in a hurry to report this important news to their sections. Soon, a disciple of the supporting Immortals Island flew over on his sword. He bowed to Yu Qianqiu and said, "Sir, the Cultivation Alliance has something to discuss. Please go there quickly." From the way he looked at Yu Qianqiu, it could be seen that he had already regarded Yu Qianqiu as an extraordinary figure. After all, Yu Qianqiu was an expert who could defeat 2 experts at the end of the crossing calamity stage by himself. And he was from the supporting Immortals Island. "Do you know what it is?" Yu Qianqiu asked. The disciple replied honestly, "It seems to be a discussion about attacking Wuji Island. I don't know the specifics." Yu Qianqiu frowned and waved his hand. "Lead the way." A flying sword flew out of his sleeve and carried him. The disciple hurriedly led the 2 of them into the town on his flying sword. From the sky, the 3 of them entered the largest house in Wanghai town. It was probably the house of a rich family. The back garden was very spacious, and there were already many people there. As soon as Yu Qianqiu arrived, everyone's eyes focused on him. The previous battle had already qualified him to be on equal footing with everyone present. Yu Qianqiu's eyes met with Luo Kuan's from the Daluo sect. The 2 of them looked at each other and looked away. However, Yu Qianqiu stared at Zhu Xianxian for a while, which made the latter feel a little creeped out. A familiar body fragrance assailed his nose. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and was shocked to find Allure Beauty beside him. She was smiling at him without saying a word. He immediately remembered that she was now the leader of the pink sect. Naturally, she was qualified to be here. Ziyi saw Allure Beauty and approached her happily. After the various sects whispered to each other, they all nodded at Quan Deming from the supporting Immortals Island. Quan Deming stood up and cupped his hands. "Everyone, we were prepared to attack Wuji Island and wipe them out in one fell swoop. Now reinforcements from Wuji Island are still rushing over. If we wait any longer, it will be even more disadvantageous for us." After asking for the opinions of the various sects, we felt that it was urgent. Now we have gathered everyone here to ask if there are any objections. There is nothing wrong with going according to the previous arrangements, but when Zhongping from the Blood Demon Palace walked out and said, "There is an accident now. Almost all the disciples from the Daluo sect were killed. It is indeed inappropriate to go according to the previous arrangements." Zhu Xianxian immediately replied, "You don't have to worry about that. Our sect's disciples are already on the way. They will arrive before sunrise tomorrow." Some of the smaller sects were secretly shocked. The large sects were indeed large sections. They lost so many people, and they made up for it just like that. Hehe, that is naturally good. However, there is something that I need Elder Zhu to explain, Wen Zhongping said with a smile. Humph, what do I need to explain to you? Zhu Xianxian said disdainfully. One was the second largest sect of the righteous path, and the other was the second largest sect of the demonic path. It was just like the supporting Immortals Island and the 10,000 demons. When they met their corresponding opponents, they would fight each other to determine who was better. It had almost become a habit. When Zhongping walked up to him and said with a smile, "Previously, Many sects listened to Elder Zhu's opinion and gathered more than 60 million superior-grade spirit stones. Now that we don't have the people, and we can't get the money back, Elder Zhu has to give us an explanation. 60 million superior-grade spirit stones is not a small number. Wen Zhongping, why are you bringing this up now? No one is forcing your blood demon palace to hand over the money. Why are you asking me for an explanation? What nonsense! As Zhu Xianxian argued, he subconsciously glanced at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu naturally understood what was going on with the 60 million, but he obediently stood to the side and turned a deaf ear to Zhu Xianxian's words. The eyes of the sects that had paid up immediately lit up. At this point, which sect would dare ask Yu Qianqiu for money or manpower? Everyone was already prepared for misfortune. However, if they took advantage of the Deluo sect's weakness and used Yu Qianqiu's presence to force the Deluo sect to cough up the money, wouldn't that be even better? That's right. Elder Zhu, you were the one who suggested it, and we raised the money according to your suggestion. Now you should at least say something about giving us people or returning our money. You can't let us lose both our people and our money. Yuan Jiuque of the Hexapath Demon Sect stepped forward. Walking up to Wen Zhongping's side, the two exchanged a smile. Wen Zhongping cupped his hands and said, "Old brother Yuan's words are reasonable. You should at least give us an explanation." That's right. You should at least give us an explanation. At least 5 or 6 sects joined in on the commotion, most of them from the demonic path. Even if the righteous path wanted to take back the money, they had no choice but to swallow their anger. After all, they were all from the righteous path, and as long as the demonic path caused a ruckus, they would definitely get their money back. Luo Kuan was resting with his eyes closed, but from the twitching of his cheeks, it was clear that he wasn't calm at all. Zhu Xianxian pointed at the two of them and said angrily, "At that time, were the two of you fighting for more money and trying to get more people? Now you're asking me for an explanation? Go find whoever took the money. Go find whoever has the hostage. Go find whoever has him." What a glib tongue. You're able to push the blame away so quickly. Wen Zhongping sneered. Your Deluo sect killed more than 200 people. Who are we going to ask for the people? Are we going to ask the legendary emperor of the Netherworld? We don't have the ability to find him. Why don't you go ask him for us? Everyone deliberately avoided Yu Qianqiu because they wanted to drag the Deluo sect into this. Zhu Xianxian suddenly shouted, "The people are Yu Qianqiu's men, and the money is also Yu Qianqiu's. Go find him if you have the ability." Everyone was silent. They didn't expect him to be so unafraid of pressure and drag Yu Qianqiu into this at this time. Everyone stared at Yu Qianqiu. As expected, Yu Qianqiu's eyelids slowly opened, and he stared at Zhu Xianxian. "Surnamed Zhu, what money did I take from you? Who do I have in my hands? Are you purposely picking a fight with me again? Do you really think that I won't dare to kill you because there are so many people here?" Zhu Xianxian looked at Luo Kuan, who was staring at him, and he felt sad. He knew that after this matter, he probably wouldn't be able to be the external manager of the Deluo sect anymore. He decided to say, "Yu Qianqiu, to tell you the truth, the Cultivation Alliance's decree to summon 600 itinerant cultivators and pay more than 60 million upper-grade spirit stones was actually pooled together by the sections. The purpose was to divide the 600 tribulation stage cultivators." The sects were speechless. When Zhongping and Yuan Jiuque's expressions twitched, they knew that things were not going well. Yu Qianqiu chuckled, looked around at everyone, and said, "So there is such a thing. This is the first time I've heard of it. I don't know which sects paid to divide up my people. Why don't you all come out? I want to see who is scheming against me behind my back." He said it was the first time he had heard of it, but who would believe him? The sects that were making a ruckus just now all turned their heads to the side, as if they had never heard of it before. The people from supporting Immortal Island looked at this disciple from supporting Immortal Island, and they found it hard to describe. Chapter 425. One person intimidated the Cultivation Alliance. It wasn't that the sects were afraid of him, but at least no one dared to openly oppose him. Strength determined status. This was something that everyone was well aware of. If Yu Qianqiu's side had lost the previous battle, the sects would have forced him to cough up 60 million spirit stones. And that would have been a light punishment. There were probably a lot of people who wanted to get rid of him. Yu Qianqiu, it's not like anyone is scheming against you. Everyone is willing to fork out money because they want some benefits. Otherwise, the sects wouldn't throw away the spirit stones they've worked so hard to save. But you've also suffered heavy losses. We're all members of the Cultivation Alliance, so it's not right to ask for anything from you. Forget it. The Blood Demon Palace won't bring this up again. Wen Zhongping waved his hand generously and returned to the Blood Demon Palace's side, as if nothing had happened. Hearing this, Zhu Xianxian was so angry that he nearly crushed his own teeth. Did the Daoyuo sect not suffer heavy losses? Did the Daoyuo sect not belong to the Alliance of Cultivators? Did the Daoyuo sect have to ask for something from the Alliance of Cultivators? He was angry, but he also understood that in the cultivation world, there were always superfluous things. Sending help in a snowy weather was nonsense. As long as there were benefits to be gained, there would be endless cases of people taking advantage of the situation. If it were someone else, the Daoyuo sect would have done the same. In the cultivation world, not protecting one's own interests was the same as cutting off one's own path to survival. The Blood Demon Palace has already set an example. Can the Hexapath Demon sect still be a villain? Yuan Jiuque laughed and walked back, waving his hand as he walked. This matter is over. The other sects didn't say anything either. It was as if doing something like this was normal. No one would feel embarrassed. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't for personal benefits. They were fighting for the entire sect. What was there to be embarrassed about? Luo Kuan's face was ashen. Everyone in the Daoyuo sect was silent, having experienced the fickleness of the world. As the second largest sect of the righteous path, once they lost their power, they were still worthless. None of them were good. Yu Qianqiu sneered. Quan Deming of the supporting Immortal Island coughed and looked around at the crowd. Since there are no other opinions, when the reinforcements from the Daoyuo sect arrive tomorrow, the 263 sects of the Cultivation Alliance will coordinate according to the original plan and strive to annihilate the Wuji Island in one fell swoop, eliminating a major threat to the Chinese cultivation world. While everyone was nodding in agreement, someone suddenly said, "Elder Quan, if the foreign cultivators of the Limitless Island are defeated, it's more likely that they will flee to the south. My sword sect leads the 36 sects, and we defend the south. Although there are many people in the 36 sects, there aren't many people with profound cultivation bases. In order to prevent any accidents, how about this? Wasn't Yu Qianqiu and the other rogue cultivators not included in the original plan? Why don't you coordinate with us to guard the south as well? This way, I'm sure it'll be much safer." When everyone heard this, they looked over and saw Duan Tianbo of the sword sect making his plans. Only then did everyone remember that the combat strength of Yu Qianqiu's subordinates was obvious to all. They were extremely powerful. As long as the other side didn't send a late-stage tribulation passing expert, the remaining 400 people should have no problem dealing with 1,000 or 2,000 people. His words woke everyone up from their dreams, and the various sects immediately became active. The sword sect, which was ranked 4th among the righteous sects, had jumped out. How could the Hexapath demonic sect, which was ranked 4th among the demonic sects, let it play a one-man show? Putting the demonic sect's face aside, they couldn't let go of such a great benefit. Yuan Jiuque chuckled and said, "Duan Tianbo, you're wrong. In my opinion, the Wuji Island is just a motley crew. Once they lose, it's unlikely that they will flee to the south. Think about it. The supporting Immortal Island is in the south with tens of thousands of disciples and experts. If they flee to the south, they will definitely be worried about being attacked by the supporting Immortal Island. Therefore, it's unlikely that they will flee to the south." Yuan Jiuque, according to what you said, do you think they will give up what's close at hand and go to the east? Duan Tianbo sneered with disdain. That's right. Once they lose, they will most likely take a detour to the east. Yuan Jiukui gestured to the crowd and said, "If we go south, even if we pass through the supporting immortal island, we will reach the vast demon ghost domain. Do you think that the motley crew of Everlasting Island can cross the demon ghost domain and go back? That should be impossible." Speaking of the demon domain, Duan Tianbo was stunned. Even he didn't believe that anyone could cross the demon domain. Since he couldn't find any reason to refute, he could only look at Yuan Jiukui with a sullen face and continue. Fleeing to the west is the hinterland of the Chinese cultivation world. Not to mention the front line of defense. If you go deeper, you'll find sentries everywhere. Once you're defeated, the sects entrenched there won't let you off easily. There's no need to mention the north. That's the closest route for them to escape. That's why we gathered our strongest forces to attack from the north. That's why the north isn't suitable for them to escape. After saying that, Yuan Jiukui hugged his stomach and looked at everyone. He laughed and said, "In that case, we don't have to worry about the south, west, and north. The place that we need to focus on is the east. That's why I feel that Yu Qianqiu and the other wandering cultivators should coordinate with us to defend the east. That way, we won't be able to block them all, but we can at least reduce the number of fish that slip through the net." The debate was well-founded and the demonic sects cheered, while the righteous sects looked inferior in comparison. The six-path demonic sect's late-stage tribulation transcendence revered elders slightly nodded and looked at Yuan Jiukui with praise. Yuan Jiukui slightly bowed to the elders and retreated. He seemed to be quite proud of himself. The Daoyuo sect's Luo Kuan glanced coldly at Zhu Xianxian. He had also heard that Yuan Jiukui and Yu Qianqiu had almost fought in the 100-Flower Valley. However, Yuan Jiukui had expressed goodwill toward Yu Qianqiu several times, and after that, he and Yu Qianqiu had gotten along peacefully. How could he be like this fellow, who couldn't distinguish the severity of the situation? When Luo Kuan compared the two sides, he couldn't help but feel sick in his heart. They were both external managers of their sects, but the disparity between them wasn't small. My De Luo sect simply picked a pig to be the manager. The Allure Beauty glanced at Yu Qianqiu, only to see him crossing his arms in front of his chest. Although this matter involved him, he didn't say a word. Half of his eyebrows were raised, and it seemed like the cold smile on his face never stopped. Luo Kuan couldn't help but shake his head. These people's words were better than singing. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu was that good of a manager? If that was the case, then he wouldn't be Yu Qianqiu. Quan Deming looked at the various sects inquiringly. Seeing that no one said anything, he nodded and said, "Since that's the case, all wandering cultivators will return to the east." Yuan Jiukui immediately beamed with joy as he looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile that said, "We're on the same side now." Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu would greet him with a face full of ridicule? Yuan Jiukui couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. This fellow was too daring. Who did he learn this from? Yuan Jiukui was really afraid that Yu Qianqiu would do something bad at the critical moment. "Yu Qianqiu, do you have any objections?" Yuan Jiukui had no choice but to ask in advance so that no one would stab him in the back. When the various sects heard this, they looked at Yu Qianqiu and found that this fellow's indifferent attitude was really thought-provoking. The sword sect's Duan Tianbo was instantly amused. Or rather, he was gloating. Who could make this fellow's decision? As expected, Yu Qianqiu looked Yuan Jiukui up and down and said in a strange tone, "You're asking me what opinions I have? You all turned a blind eye to me and made the decision first. Now you're asking me what opinions I have? It's the first time I've seen such an unreasonable person in the cultivation world." Putting aside Yuan Jiukui's embarrassment, the one who was the most embarrassed was Fuxian Island's Quan Deming. It seemed like he was the one who made the final decision. Quan Deming opened his mouth and said with a bitter smile, "I've been negligent. Yu Qianqiu, you don't have to be calculative. If you have anything to say, you might as well say it. I have to give face to Elder Quan, and I've always been an honest person. I won't beat around the bush. Since that's the case, I'll speak the truth. If there's anything unpleasant in my words, please don't take it to heart." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the various sects and slowly said, "I've already been schemed against before I even arrived. Whether you all admit it or not, it's a fact that everyone is well aware of. I originally came here with a belly full of hot-bloodedness. I wanted to do my utmost for the Chinese cultivation world, even if I had to die 1,000 deaths. But there are deaths that are heavier than a mountain, and there are deaths that are lighter than a goose feather. Dying in battle for the Chinese cultivation world is heavier than a mountain, and dying from being schemed against is lighter than a goose feather. Everyone, you've really disappointed me. Since that's the case, instead of leaving me with lingering fear, it's better to let me continue to do my utmost until my death. I think we wandering cultivators shouldn't be included in this matter. The various sects looked at each other in dismay. It turned out that he just wanted to go it alone. Duan Tianbo looked at Yuan Jiukui, who had just spent a lot of time talking but was now in a daze. He couldn't help but smile. Fight my ass. So what if they won? Quan Deming frowned and said, Yu Qianqiu, we're all part of the Cultivation Alliance. Before the war, all sects should obey the unified arrangement. It's not good that you guys aren't included. It's true that all sects should obey the arrangement, but the key is that we're wandering cultivators. We don't belong to any sects, so we naturally don't need to follow the rules of the sections. Yu Qianqiu said with some emotion. More than 600 people. We've only just arrived. More than 200 people died in the blink of an eye. If we didn't have some ability to protect ourselves, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to stand and talk right now. Everyone, it's not that we don't want to follow the rules, but the lesson we just learned with the lives of 200 people is unforgettable. 200 dead people were a bunch of reasons, but what about 1,000 dead people? Everyone cursed inwardly, their eyes inadvertently glancing at the Deluo sect, who didn't look happy. You may be wandering cultivators, but since you've already joined the Cultivation Alliance, you should at least do your part. The Cultivation Alliance's budget of spiritual stones. Before Quan Deming could finish, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted. Elder Quan, don't worry. We wandering cultivators may be weak, but we're the most trustworthy. We'll never take money and not work. Even if we're not in the scope of the overall arrangement, we're still loyal. If you don't believe me, just wait and see. What exactly do you mean? Just say it. Quan Deming didn't want to spar with him anymore. No matter how much he beat around the bush, he wouldn't get anything practical. It's very simple. Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and said, We wandering cultivators fight independently and look for opportunities on our own. We don't need to be included in the Cultivation Alliance's overall arrangement for the time being. We'll talk about the overall arrangement after our wounded hearts have calmed down a little. What do you think? All the sects looked at each other, but no one expressed their opinion. They were all wondering how long it would take for their wounded hearts to calm down, especially when it came to looking for opportunities. That was quite unreliable. What if they couldn't find an opportunity? Also, everyone had to pay for the expenses of more than 400 wandering cultivators. The thought of someone taking money without doing any work made no one happy. Although it wasn't a lot, it was still unfair. Quan Deming pondered for a while, then looked at everyone and said, Fuxian Island isn't in a position to make decisions for everyone. I wonder if anyone has any different opinions? At that moment, 100 Charm Demon Lady stood up and said with a smile, I've spent some time with the wandering cultivators, and I'm quite confident in their ability to look for opportunities to fight. Perhaps it's more suitable than our overall arrangement. On behalf of the Pink Sect, I agree that the wandering cultivators fight independently. Of course you agree. Perhaps you've already slept on the same bed with Yu Qianqiu. You're a family. All the sects looked at 100 Charm Demon Lady ambiguously. At that moment, the four major families naturally wouldn't pass on the responsibility. Bai Shan said in a deep voice, the four major families agree. 10,000 demons had their own plans for Yu Qianqiu, so they also agreed. Hexapath Demon Sect's Yuan Jiukui looked around and laughed. It seems like my previous thoughts were a little shallow. Since 10,000 demons agree, then Hexapath Demon Sect will also support it. Fuxian Island will listen to everyone's opinions. If anyone has any different opinions, feel free to voice them. Don't let it affect tomorrow's battle, said Quan Deming. Most of the sects remained silent, clearly unwilling to do so. However, no one was willing to offend Yu Qianqiu in front of them. This fellow's way of doing things was a little vengeful, and his strength was displayed in front of everyone. There was nothing that couldn't be resolved, so it was best not to provoke him. Everyone expressed their protest with silence. No objection means you agree. Thank you for your understanding and support. Yu Qianqiu nodded and turned to Quan Deming with cupped fists. Elder Quan, everyone's opinion is clear. Please make the final announcement. This will give us the right to fight. Everyone's expression twitched. They had never seen someone as shameless as him. Quan Deming looked around in shock and asked in a loud voice, "Are there really no objections from the sects?" He looked around, and no one said anything. He could only smile bitterly and say, "Since no one objects, then let's do it." He felt embarrassed to say anything, so he could only reply perfunctorily. Yu Qianqiu didn't think much of it. After all, this was what he wanted. He turned around and cupped his fists to thank everyone. However, most of them turned around and left. Who would want this kind of thanks? You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.